Hey, you. Yeah, the one who gives their whole heart and still feels invisible. If you've ever stayed too long, apologized too much, or slowly faded in the background just to keep a connection alive, this book is for you. Written and published by Mindful Literary. I know what it's like to think you're loving someone while quietly abandoning yourself. You think you're being loyal, empathetic, devoted, but really, you're vanishing. This book isn't about blame, it's about recognition. We're not talking about love that's toxic or abusive. We're talking about the softer kind of self-erasure. The kind where your yes aren't real. The kind where you lose your opinions, hobbies, or even your laugh trying to be who they need. The kind that feels like loyalty, but smells like fear. You were probably never taught how to stay with yourself inside your relationships. So, that's what we're doing here. This isn't therapy. It's a practical, loving guide for anyone who's tired of shrinking just to be held. Let's get you back. Let's teach your heart it doesn't have to disappear to be loved. Introduction. I thought I was loving them. I was losing me. The slow unraveling of self in the name of love or loyalty. Imagine someone who always puts the needs of loved ones before their own, believing that kindness and loyalty mean sacrificing personal desires. At first, these actions feel like acts of love, doing favors, making sacrifices, or simply bending to the will of others out of care. Over time, however, these small choices accumulate, gradually shifting the person's focus away from their own needs and wants. Without realizing it, they may begin to feel detached from who they truly are, as if they are becoming a reflection of everyone else's needs rather than their own. This process isn't sudden. It is often so subtle that it feels natural, almost inevitable, because devotion feels like a virtue. The problem arises when these little sacrifices become woven into the fabric of everyday life, slowly constricting the person's sense of independence and authenticity. This story is common because love or loyalty often carries the expectation of selflessness, which can lead us into a trap. We start believing that our worth is measured by how much we're willing to give or how fully we're willing to serve others. Yet, this mindset can quietly erode our sense of self, turning our inner voice into silence while our outer life becomes cluttered with obligations and responsibilities. The danger is that we might not even notice when this transition begins. It's as if we're caught in a current that pulls us further away from ourselves, all while convincing us we're fulfilling a higher purpose. The challenge lies in recognizing the early signs of this shift, understanding that love and loyalty should never require us to lose sight of who we are. Only then can we preserve our identity while still cherishing our connections. Paying attention to the small moments can be eye-opening. These are the times when you might feel slightly resentful after doing something for someone else, almost like a tiny prick in your conscience, but dismiss it as normal. Perhaps you notice that your own hobbies or friendships are gradually slipping away because you're so busy attending to others' needs, and it doesn't seem to bother you at first. Sometimes it shows up as saying yes to everything, whether it aligns with your values or not, because you fear disappointing someone or you're trying to maintain peace. A quiet voice inside might warn you that this isn't quite right, but you brush it aside, thinking it's just temporary. The key is to learn how to listen to that voice and distinguish between genuine sacrifice and signs that your boundaries are being pushed without your awareness. Other subtle signs include feeling exhausted or disconnected without understanding why, or noticing a lack of enthusiasm for your own life. You might find yourself doing things solely out of obligation, with no real joy left in the act. A peculiar sense of guilt can also start to take hold if you even think about doing something solely for yourself, as if your needs are selfish or wrong. These feelings are clues that your sense of self is gradually getting overshadowed by your efforts to please others. The crucial step is to pause and reflect, asking yourself whether these sacrifices truly serve your well-being or if they're simply a habit born from fear of rejection or insecurity. Recognizing these moments isn't about judgment, but about creating space to reconnect with your own identity and clarify your personal boundaries. By sharpening this awareness, you can begin to identify when you're acting out of genuine love or loyalty versus when you're sacrificing parts of yourself to avoid conflict or to gain approval. It helps to remember that healthy relationships grow when both parties respect each other's boundaries and individuality. Small, consistent reflections, such as checking in with yourself regularly, can prevent the gradual loss of self and keep your inner world grounded. When you notice these signs early, you can gently start to realign, making conscious choices about when to give and when to prioritize your own needs without guilt. This process creates a foundation for relationships based on mutual respect, where devotion does not come at the expense of your true self. What codependence really is, not just clingy behavior. Many people think of codependence as simply being clingy or overly attached to someone else. While that might be part of the picture, it misses the deeper emotional undercurrents that truly define it. At its core, codependence involves a level of emotional entanglement where boundaries between individuals become blurred. Instead of relating to others in a balanced way, you might find your feelings and identity so intertwined that it's hard to distinguish where your emotions end and theirs begin. This kind of enmeshment creates a sense of losing oneself in the process of caring for or fixing another person, often at the expense of your own well-being. Recognizing this helps us see that at the heart of codependence is not just wanting to help or be close, but a profound difficulty in maintaining healthy emotional boundaries. This emotional closeness can feel comforting, but often comes with a hidden price. When boundaries are fuzzy, it becomes challenging to identify where your feelings start and where someone else's end. This overlap can lead to feelings of guilt, anxiety, or resentment that are harder to name because they're rooted in this deep interconnection. For example, someone might feel responsible for a partner's happiness or even their problems, believing their worth depends on constantly being there or fixing everything. This isn't simply about love or concern. It's about losing sight of oneself in the process, and that's why it's crucial to understand that codependence is primarily about emotional enmeshment rather than just clingy behavior. Recognizing this can start to shift how we approach our own relationships, helping us see the importance of developing clear boundaries and a stronger sense of self. Codependency often shows up through patterns of overresponsibility, where one person takes on much more than their fair share in relationships. This might look like always wanting to fix problems, constantly saying yes to everyone's needs, and pushing your own aside. Over time, this behavior creates a cycle where you become so focused on others that you forget to care for yourself. You might find yourself neglecting your health, hobbies, or emotional needs because you believe your primary role is to support or rescue the other person. For example, someone might stay in a toxic relationship because they feel responsible for their partner's happiness, ignoring their own boundaries or desires. This tendency to overresponsibility not only drains you, but also reinforces the belief that your worth depends on your sacrifices and constant availability. Alongside this pattern comes self-neglect, where your own needs and feelings are continually put on hold or dismissed. Over time, neglecting oneself can lead to feelings of fatigue, resentment, and a sense of emptiness. It's common for people caught in these patterns to feel guilty when they consider focusing on their own wants, believing they must prioritize others to be good or worthy. This cycle can be hard to break because it feels like a moral obligation to put others first, even when that means ignoring what you need for your own sanity and happiness. Recognizing these patterns for what they are, signs of a deep-rooted tendency towards overresponsibility and self-neglect, is the first step toward reclaiming your boundaries. Trust that caring for yourself is not selfish, but necessary for truly healthy relationships. Small acts of prioritizing your own well-being can gradually dismantle these ingrained habits and create space for genuine connection rather than enmeshment. The quiet pain of being needed more than you're seen. Feeling needed by others can bring a strange mix of satisfaction and loneliness. When you step into the role of the constant supporter, caretaker, or problem solver, it often feels good to be relied upon. It's a sign that your presence matters, that someone values what you bring to their life. But beneath that surface, many people carry a quiet pain, an ache that stays hidden. It's the feeling of being essential yet unseen, appreciated only for what you give rather than who you are. This contrast can leave a lingering sense of emptiness, like being a vital part of a machine but lacking recognition for your true self. It's easy to mistake acts of service or kindness for genuine connection. When you're always the one making arrangements, solving problems, or providing emotional support, others may begin to see you mainly as the helper, not as a whole person with your own needs and feelings. Over time, this can make you feel invisible in your own life, as if your presence is only valuable when it fulfills a purpose. Despite the external appearances of strength and reliability, beneath the surface, there might be a quiet longing to be seen beyond what you do, a desire for someone to notice you for who you are, not just what you offer. Recognizing this disconnect is a first step toward addressing the deeper vulnerability underneath the need to be needed. This kind of invisible hardship often hides behind a mask of stability and selflessness. You might find yourself putting others first, suppressing your own desires and emotions to keep the peace or fulfill a role. The external validation of being helpful becomes a comfort, even if it leaves you feeling unrecognized or undervalued. It's important to understand that feeling unseen in your own life isn't a failure or weakness. It's a common experience many go through silently. Identifying these feelings without judgment allows you to start questioning what you truly need from your relationships and how to find a sense of worth that doesn't depend solely on external validation or being indispensable to others. Even when you're surrounded by people or constantly giving to others, loneliness can still creep in quietly. It's a paradox that the act of caring deeply for others can sometimes mask your own feelings of isolation. You might wake up feeling a sense of disconnection from your own emotions, or you could go through days without sharing your true thoughts with anyone. Many people develop a caring facade that makes it difficult for others to realize how alone they feel. This outward expression of kindness often becomes a shield to protect against vulnerability, but beneath it, there might be an aching wish to be truly seen and understood for yourself, not just as someone who does things for others. This hidden loneliness often manifests as a sense of being caught between roles. On the one hand, you might be the dependable friend, the supportive partner, or the caring coworker. On the other, there's an inner voice that whispers your need for genuine connection and emotional intimacy. The challenge is that, in many cases, this need remains unspoken, tucked away behind a surface of calmness or friendliness. You may find yourself longing for someone to notice your quiet suffering or to reach out with understanding, but often, these signals go unnoticed. Recognizing these moments of loneliness, especially when you're hiding behind a caring persona, can open the door to seeking authentic relationships where your feelings are met with vulnerability, not just service. Sometimes, acknowledging this loneliness involves asking yourself hard questions about your boundaries and your emotional needs. Are you pushing away your own feelings to maintain harmony? Do you feel guilty or uncomfortable if you admit to wanting more from your relationships? It's crucial to remember that everyone deserves genuine connection, and feeling lonely doesn't mean you are weak or unworthy. It simply means there's a part of you craving meaningful interaction beyond surface-level acts of kindness. Giving yourself permission to feel and express these needs can be an empowering step toward building relationships where you're valued for your whole self, not just what you do for others. A small, practical tip is to start sharing one true feeling or thought with someone you trust. Even a simple step like this can help break the silence of loneliness and bring more authenticity into your connections. This book is for the ones who love too much, too hard, too quietly. Many people who love deeply tend to give so much of themselves to others that they forget about their own needs. They might find happiness in caring for loved ones, dreaming of making others happy, and constantly prioritizing others' well-being over their own. But what these caring hearts often overlook is that pouring endlessly without refilling their own emotional well can lead to exhaustion, resentment, and a sense of emptiness. Loving too much, especially in silence or quietly, risks turning into self-neglect because the focus is solely on how much they can give, often neglecting an inner call for restoration. It's like trying to run a car on empty. No matter how much you want to keep going, eventually, you run out of fuel. Recognizing this pattern is the first step in creating a safe space, a space where your feelings, needs, and boundaries are as important as your intentions to love, and understanding that caring for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary for sustainable love. When you forget to fill your own cup, you might notice feelings of overwhelm or even guilt when you try to put yourself first. Remember, loving others profoundly doesn't mean sacrificing your well-being. Instead, it means nurturing yourself with the same kindness you extend outward. Establishing this safe space involves cultivating awareness of your emotional state, learning to identify when your energy is waning, and permitting yourself to pause and prioritize your needs without feeling guilty. These moments of pause serve as the foundation to sustain your capacity to love deeply without losing yourself. Deep love is a gift, a powerful capacity that can fill both your heart and the hearts of others. Yet, loving at such a profound level can sometimes be mistaken for neglecting oneself. The challenge is to learn how to love with the same intensity for your own well-being as you do for others. Loving yourself fiercely means recognizing your worth outside of what you give or how much you care. It's about understanding that your emotional health is not secondary, it's fundamental. When you honor your capacity to love deeply, you begin to see that your love is not a powerless act, but one that begins with yourself. This involves treating yourself with the same empathy and patience you show others. For example, if you're used to putting others' needs first, practice consistently setting boundaries that safeguard your energy and emotional space. This might mean saying no more often, taking time for solitary reflection, or allowing yourself to rest without guilt. Loving oneself fiercely isn't about perfection. It's about honesty and acknowledgement of your vulnerabilities and strengths alike. One way to nurture this form of love is through small daily actions, such as affirming your worth, engaging in activities that rejuvenate your spirit, and forgiving yourself when things are not perfect. When you become your own champion, your capacity for love expands naturally because it's rooted in authenticity, not sacrifice. Loving yourself as fiercely as you love others ensures that your love becomes sustainable. Not a silent sacrifice, but a genuine source of strength that propels you to love more fully and authentically. Chapter 1. Codependence isn't what you think it is. Not just about romantic relationships. Many people think of codependence as something that only happens in romantic relationships, but it actually extends far beyond that. It can quietly take hold in friendships, where one person consistently sacrifices their needs to support or please the other. For example, maybe you find yourself always saying yes to plans, even when you're exhausted, simply because you fear disappointing your friend. Over time, this pattern of prioritizing others' happiness over your own can become ingrained, making it difficult to set boundaries or say no without guilt. The same pattern plays out within families. Sometimes, a parent might become overly involved in a child's problems, feeling responsible for every emotional bump or struggle, even when the child is capable of handling things independently. This kind of overreach often stems from a desire to be needed or to maintain a sense of control within the family dynamic. Conversely, children or other family members might lean heavily on one person, creating an unbalanced relationship where one is constantly giving while the other is receiving without reciprocation. This dynamic can quietly erode the relationship over time, leading to resentment or emotional exhaustion. Work environments are no exception. When a person feels their value tied to taking on extra tasks or always being available, they risk slipping into codependence at the job. For example, someone might consistently volunteer for overtime or handle others' responsibilities because they fear what might happen if they don't. This can create a cycle where personal boundaries are ignored in favor of maintaining the approval or expectation of colleagues. Such situations often lead to burnout, as the individual's own needs become secondary to the perceived needs of the team or boss. Recognizing how these patterns infiltrate different relationships involves paying close attention to your own behaviors and feelings. Are you often sacrificing your own well-being, fearing rejection or disappointment? Do you feel responsible for fixing others' issues or overly driven by a need to be needed? Once these signs come into focus, it becomes clearer that codependence isn't just about romantic ties, but a broader approach to connecting with others that can sneak into every part of your life. Understanding that codependence appears across various relationships is a liberating step. It shifts the focus from feeling like something's wrong with you to seeing it as a pattern that can be addressed. Many people start to notice that their behaviors are repeated in different settings. For example, maybe you tend to neglect your own feelings when dealing with friends, but also remain overly committed at work, constantly trying to control outcomes beyond your influence. Recognizing this pattern allows you to see that the issue isn't isolated to any one relationship, but rooted in how you engage with others generally. This pattern can serve as a mask for deeper fears, perhaps a fear of abandonment, rejection, or simply feeling unworthy of love or respect. When you're in this mode, your actions are often driven by a need to maintain harmony or avoid conflict, even at the cost of your authenticity. Over time, this can become so familiar that it feels like the only way to relate, making it difficult to distinguish your true desires from habitual responses formed to keep peace or stay safe. The good news is that once you begin to notice these recurring themes, you can start to unravel them. Recognizing that a tendency to overextend or sacrifice is part of a broader pattern gives you space to make conscious choices. You can start to ask yourself questions like, am I doing this because I genuinely want to, or because I feel I should? Or, what would happen if I didn't push myself to the limit? Facing these questions gradually loosens the grip of old habits, opening the door to healthier ways of engaging with others that respect your boundaries and needs. It's also helpful to remember that shifting away from codependent patterns isn't about perfection, but about awareness and practice. Small actions, like practicing saying no without guilt or taking time for self-care, can gradually reinforce that your needs matter just as much as anyone else's. As you notice these patterns in different parts of your life, you empower yourself to build relationships that are based on mutual respect rather than imbalance. The need to be needed. At the heart of many relationships that feel overwhelming or unbalanced lies a deep-seated desire to be needed. This often springs from a wish to feel valuable, secure, and to have a clear purpose in someone else's life. For some, it becomes almost addictive. Being needed provides a sense of identity that they might struggle to find within themselves. This need can manifest as constantly offering help, putting others' needs before one's own, or feeling uncomfortable when others seem self-sufficient. It's easy to fall into the trap of believing that being indispensable makes us lovable or vital. Over time, these behaviors create a pattern where the person feels a compulsion to meet others' needs, not solely because they care, but because that's how they reinforce their own sense of self-worth. Often, this desire to be needed is rooted in feelings of insecurity or past experiences where unconditional love felt absent. Maybe someone grew up in an environment where their value was tied to how much they did for others, or where they learned that their worth depended on fulfilling others' expectations. This can make it difficult to differentiate between genuine care and a compulsive attempt to fill an emotional void. Understanding this underlying drive is crucial because it shifts the focus from blaming oneself for these behaviors to recognizing a deep human longing, a desire to connect and feel essential. Once we see that the need to be needed often masks deeper fears or feelings of inadequacy, it becomes easier to approach change gently and with compassion. Still, recognizing these patterns takes honesty and patience, especially when they have been ingrained over many years. Many times, the need to be needed isn't just about wanting meaningful connection, but also about avoiding loneliness, rejection, or abandonment. When feelings of vulnerability strike, some people subconsciously latch onto the idea that if they're needed enough, they will be less likely to be left behind or discarded. This fear can drive behaviors that seem caring on the surface, but actually serve to protect against emotional pain. Reflecting on the motivations behind our actions can reveal whether we genuinely enjoy helping others, or if we're primarily trying to hold onto a sense of security. For example, imagine someone constantly seeking approval or reassurance because they're afraid the underlying message is, "If I'm not needed, I might be abandoned." This fear often fuels a cycle where the individual becomes overly involved in others' lives, because they believe that without this roles, they won't survive emotionally. To question this deeply held need, it helps to observe what happens in moments of vulnerability. Do we feel anxious or empty when we're not asked for help? Do we find ourselves panicking when someone seems independent or distant? These moments can highlight whether our need is rooted more in a desire for authentic connection or in a fear that, without being needed, we are somehow invisible or unworthy. Exploring these questions isn't always easy, especially because both motivations can coexist. The genuine wish to connect and the fear of abandonment often happen at the same time. Recognizing the difference allows us to approach relationships with clearer boundaries and honest intentions. It also opens the door to nurturing a sense of self that isn't dependent on others' validation, giving a sense of stability independent of external circumstances. By doing this, we can start to build healthier relationships, ones where we are valued for who we truly are, not just for what we do or the role we play. Fixing, saving, absorbing other people's emotions. Many of us have a natural instinct to help others, especially when they are struggling. It often feels fulfilling to be the person who steps in, offers support, or tries to fix what's broken in someone else's life. But sometimes, this instinct can become a habit that pulls us into rescue mode, where we prioritize others' problems over our own emotional health without even realizing it. When you're constantly trying to save or fix others, it can lead to feeling exhausted, overwhelmed, or even resentful, because beneath the surface, you're neglecting your own needs. Recognizing this pattern requires honest self-awareness. Pay attention to moments when you feel compelled to solve someone else's problems at your own expense, or when saying yes to every request leaves you drained. It's important to understand that, although helping is natural, overstepping into rescue mode can create boundaries that limit healthy emotional exchanges. Often, we do this because we associate our value with how much we can give, but this can be a trap that prevents us from caring for ourselves. Putting your well-being first isn't selfish. It's an act of self-respect and a vital step toward genuine connection. Notice your feelings when you say yes out of obligation versus choice, and ask yourself if you're truly aligning your actions with your core needs, rather than just trying to appease or fix others. Learning to see this pattern isn't about shame or judgment. Instead, it's about gently observing your tendencies and understanding the motives behind them. For example, think about a friend who frequently confides in you about their struggles and how, over time, you might start feeling anxious or exhausted after every conversation, yet find yourself unable to step away. This might be a sign that you're taking on too much emotionally, even if you don't realize it. Or perhaps you're constantly offering advice, even when someone just needs to be heard. These behaviors often stem from a desire to feel useful or loved, but if you're neglecting your own emotional boundaries, it can diminish your resilience and happiness. Becoming aware of these habits gives you a chance to pause and reflect on whether they serve your overall well-being. What starts as helping becomes a cycle that can drain your emotional energy and blur the lines between care and over-involvement. Recognizing when you're slipping into rescue mode is the first step. The next is actively choosing how to respond in a way that honors both yourself and others. True connection isn't about solving someone else's problems or taking away their pain. Instead, it's about holding space for their feelings without the need to intervene or control the outcome. When we believe we must fix others' pain, we sometimes unintentionally send the message that their feelings aren't valid unless they're resolved. This creates a barrier to real intimacy because it implies that vulnerability, uncertainty, and discomfort are somehow wrong or wrongable. Yet, authentic connection allows us to sit with each other's emotions, even when they're uncomfortable or messy. We learn to accept that pain is a natural part of life, and that sometimes the greatest gift we can give someone is simply listening, without trying to fix or change the experience. Instead of rushing to find solutions, practice holding space for others by offering empathetic presence. Sometimes simply saying, "I hear you," can be enough. This approach fosters trust, deepens bonds, and helps others feel truly seen and heard. It's a shift from giving advice or trying to rescue toward accepting that pain has value. It's part of being human. This doesn't mean we become passive bystanders, but rather we engage in a way that respects others' process and boundaries, understanding that they need to experience their feelings fully to grow through them. Growing comfortable with this way of relating takes practice. It's common to feel instinctive urges to fix or solve because it provides a quick sense of doing something, a way to avoid feeling helpless or uncomfortable ourselves. But real connection thrives on authenticity and vulnerability, acknowledging that we don't always have to fix in order to be helpful. Sometimes, the most supportive thing we can do is simply be present, listen patiently, and avoid jumping into advice giving unless explicitly asked. For example, if a friend shares their frustrations, instead of jumping into solutions, you might respond, "It sounds like you're going through a lot right now. I'm here for you." That kind of response validates the other person's feelings without implying that their pain needs to be remedied immediately. Over time, shifting from fixing to being present can develop more meaningful, trusting relationships where both parties feel safe to express their true feelings without fear of judgment or being taught how to feel better. Ultimately, understanding that authentic connection allows others to process their emotions in their own time, which is often more healing than any quick fix. Why it's often confused with love, loyalty, or caretaking. Many of us grow up thinking that caring deeply for others is the same as love, but sometimes these actions can become a confusing mix that overlaps with codependence. When we constantly put others' needs before our own or feel responsible for their happiness, it can feel like genuine love, but in reality, it starts to blur into something more draining. This often shows up in everyday interactions. Perhaps you find yourself always saying yes to friends, family, or partners, even when it costs you your peace or well-being. Over time, these behaviors can feel normal because they are repeated so often, yet they hide a dangerous pattern: the line between caring and losing yourself. Recognizing this shift is key because what feels like devotion can actually be a sign that your boundaries have dissolved and your sense of self is diminishing in the process. Think about the difference between wanting to support someone out of genuine concern versus feeling compelled to fix or control their problems. When love truly exists, It's rooted in respect for each person's independence, allowing space for both to grow on their own terms. But with codependence, there tends to be an underlying need to feel needed or to maintain a sense of control by constantly managing the other person's feelings or issues. While these behaviors are not intentional acts of manipulation, they often stem from unconscious beliefs that only through sacrifice or caretaking can love be validated. Understanding this distinction helps us see that many acts labeled as loving are actually attempts to fill an internal void or avoid feelings of discomfort, creating a confusing mix that makes it hard to tell where love ends and dependence begins. Genuine care involves a willingness to support someone while maintaining your own sense of self. It's characterized by empathy, respect, and healthy boundaries that allow both people to feel seen and valued without losing their individuality. When we overextend ourselves, however, the act of caring can turn into self-erasure. For example, sacrificing your own needs repeatedly just to keep someone happy or prevent conflict gradually erodes your sense of identity. Over time, you can begin to feel like your worth is tied entirely to how much you do for others rather than who you are at your core. This overextension can also lead to feelings of resentment, frustration, or burnout because, in the effort to be helpful, you neglect your own emotional health. It's important to notice when your giving becomes compulsive or when the boundary between caring and overextending is no longer clear. One way to differentiate genuine care from overreach is to observe how you feel after the interaction. If you experience a sense of fulfillment and natural boundaries that feel comfortable, it's usually a sign that your care is healthy. But if you find yourself exhausted, resentful, or suddenly unsure about your own needs, it might be time to reassess. Ask yourself whether your actions serve only the other person or if they also nourish your well-being. Building awareness around these feelings helps you create healthier relationships, ones in which both parties feel supported without sacrificing their true selves. Remember, caring for others does not mean losing sight of your own identity. Rather, it's about finding a balance where love and self-respect coexist. Practicing this balance involves pausing to reflect before acting. Ask yourself whether what you are about to do aligns with your values and whether it lifts you up or drains you. Setting clear boundaries and communicating what you need is also essential, as it creates space for authentic connection without the risk of burnout. Ultimately, genuine care starts within. When you nurture your own emotional health, it becomes easier to show up for others in a way that feels sustainable and true. Start small, and notice how establishing one boundary or practicing self-awareness can shift your relationships into healthier, more balanced interactions. Chapter 2, where it starts, attachment, fear, and identity. Childhood dynamics and emotional templates. From the moment we are born, our earliest interactions with caregivers set a foundation for how we understand connection and safety. These initial bonds teach us whether love feels dependable or uncertain, whether getting close is comforting or risky. When caregiving is consistent, nurturing, and responsive, it builds a sense of trust that love can be relied upon. But if those early interactions are unpredictable, neglectful, or even dismissive, we may grow up carrying deep-seated fears that love isn't safe or that closeness will inevitably lead to pain. As adults, these patterns don't just fade away. Instead, they become templates that influence how we form relationships, how we handle intimacy, and how we respond when we experience loss. For example, someone with an anxious attachment style might find themselves constantly seeking reassurance from partners, worried that they might be abandoned even when there's no obvious reason to doubt the relationship. On the other hand, someone who experienced neglect may subconsciously push people away, afraid that closeness will only result in rejection. These early messages can also shape how we cope with grief. If we learn to suppress emotions because vulnerability wasn't encouraged, facing loss can feel overwhelming because our emotional muscle memory is to shut down or avoid. Recognizing how our childhood attachment styles creep into adult relationships and our handling of loss provides a vital step toward understanding patterns that might be holding us back from deeper connection or emotional healing. Understanding this connection isn't about blame, it's about awareness. When you reflect on your relationship history or emotional reactions, you might notice recurring themes, like a fear that love will always end or an impulse to cling tightly when someone is close. These are often rooted in early attachment experiences that shaped your internal working models, mental representations of what love and safety mean. As we grow, These models continue to influence how we view ourselves and others in love. Becoming aware of these silent templates gives us the chance to challenge their influence, fostering healthier, more secure ways of relating to others and ourselves. It reminds us that our childhood experiences, while influential, don't define our entire capacity to love or heal from loss. They are starting points that can be reshaped with conscious effort and compassion. Many of us carry invisible messages from childhood whispering that our worth depends on what we do, how we look, or how well we meet expectations. These messages often come from caregivers, teachers, or peers who inadvertently or intentionally signal that love is conditional. For instance, a child might hear that approval only comes if they excel academically, behave perfectly, or stay silent about their feelings. Over time, these signals can start to feel like core truths. If I don't perform or meet certain standards, I am unworthy of love or attention. This leads to a deep-seated belief that worthiness hinges on constant effort and achievement, not simply being who we are. As adults, this mindset can manifest as an exhausting cycle of seeking validation through accomplishments or pleasing others, often at the expense of ourselves. We might chase success, approval, or recognition, feeling that unless we prove ourselves, we're not enough. These messages shape our emotional templates profoundly, making us equate self-worth with external validation rather than internal acceptance. Reflecting honestly on childhood messages reveals how deeply ingrained these patterns are and helps us see that our worth does not depend on what we do. Recognizing these internalized signals gives us the power to reframe our self-view, reminding ourselves that genuine worth is inherent and not tied to performance. Challenging these old messages isn't about dismissing effort or achievements, but about shifting the focus from external validation to internal self-compassion. It involves recognizing that the roots of these feelings are often misplaced, rooted in childhood survival mechanisms that no longer serve us. Developing a practice of gentle self-inquiry, questioning where these beliefs come from and whether they are fair, can be transformative. Over time, replacing the narrative of, "I am enough only if I perform," with "I am inherently worthy," can open the door to healthier relationships, both with ourselves and others. The journey begins with a simple step: acknowledging these messages without judgment and giving yourself permission to define your worth on your own terms. Conditional love and performance-based worth. Many of us grew up in environments where love was not given freely or unconditionally. Instead, it was tied to specific behaviors, achievements, or meeting certain expectations. For example, children often learn that good grades, obedience, or being the perfect child earn praise and affection, while mistakes or failures can lead to withdrawal or disappointment from caregivers. Over time, these messages subtly teach us that love is something to earn, rather than something we inherently deserve. As a result, many of us become adept at presenting a version of ourselves that aligns with what others find acceptable, rather than truly showing who we are inside. This conditional approach to love creates a mindset where approval feels like a currency. We might feel safest when we're performing well or meeting expectations, but deeply struggle with feeling genuinely loved for who we are, flaws and all. This often leads to a tough internal battle between wanting to be authentic and fearing rejection if our true selves are exposed. When love is contingent on our actions or achievements, it encourages us to prioritize superficial harmony over genuine connection. Over years, this can foster a habit of suppressing our authentic feelings, interests, and vulnerabilities because revealing them might threaten our acceptance and sense of worth. Reflecting on our past can reveal how much those early messages about conditional love shape how we see ourselves today. If we learn that worth is attached to external validation, then internal confidence often becomes fragile. We might find ourselves constantly seeking approval from others, whether through social media, work, or personal relationships, because that approval temporarily boosts our self-esteem. It's common to feel that if we don't perform well or live up to expectations, we're somehow less valuable or lovable. This pattern makes it difficult to feel secure in who we are, independent of external opinions. Recognizing these patterns is the first step toward shifting how we view our worth. It invites us to question whether we are genuinely loving ourselves or just reflecting the conditional love we received as children. Often, we carry feelings like shame or inadequacy, which are rooted in the idea that our worth is conditional. This can lead to a constant inner dialogue of self-criticism, where every mistake or weakness is magnified and our inherent value feels diminished. Only by examining these early influences can we begin to heal and reclaim a sense of worth that is stable and based on who we truly are, rather than on external validation. This is a process of unlearning old messages and gradually cultivating an inner voice that affirms your worth unconditionally. Simple practices, such as consciously offering yourself kindness or listing your personal strengths, help counteract the voice of conditional love. Remember, the foundation of authentic self-worth comes from recognizing that you are inherently enough, regardless of your latest achievement or failure. These insights can empower you to lead a life where love and acceptance start from within, giving you a more stable ground in facing life's inevitable ups and downs. The fear of abandonment dressed up as devotion. Many times, the fear of abandonment shows up quietly, weaving itself into our relationships in ways we don't immediately notice. It might be lurking behind small moments of clinginess, or in the way we settle for less than we deserve just to keep someone around. For example, we might find ourselves repeatedly checking our partner's messages or feeling anxious when they spend time with friends, even if nothing is wrong. These behaviors are often driven by a quiet belief that if we don't hold on tightly, we'll be left behind or force someone to walk away. This isn't always obvious at first glance because it disguises itself as devotion or loyalty. But beneath the surface, it's rooted in a deep-seated fear that we aren't enough or that rejection is inevitable. Recognizing these subtle signals involves tuning into our emotions and being honest with ourselves about what underpins our need for reassurance or constant proximity. Fear of abandonment often manifests in patterns that keep us stuck in cycles we know aren't healthy. For instance, we might accept behaviors or situations that erode our self-esteem because we believe that any change or risk of loss is worse. This can mean staying in a relationship where we feel unappreciated or avoiding conflicts that could threaten the connection. Sometimes we even unconsciously sabotage closeness, for fear that if we become too dependent or vulnerable, the other person will feel overwhelmed and leaves anyway. This creates a paradoxical situation. The more we cling or act anxiously to keep someone near, the further they may feel pulled away. Being aware of these patterns helps us see how fear is subtly holding us back from genuine connection, creating a cycle where the need to be loved becomes intertwined with the fear of losing it. Understanding the difference between true commitment and fear-driven attachment requires a gentle honesty with ourselves about our intentions and emotional state. Genuine commitment emerges from a place of love, respect, and trust, where we choose to be present with someone because we genuinely value the relationship and feel secure enough to show up authentically. It feels like a shared journey, a mutual letting go of control and accepting that imperfections exist. In contrast, fear-driven attachment often feels clingy, compulsive, or hurried. It can manifest as a desperate need for reassurance, a constant seeking of validation, or an overwhelming fear of being alone. When we're driven by fear, we might find ourselves hanging onto a relationship long after it's clear that it's no longer healthy or nourishing. We might also feel a sense of emptiness or anxiety if we're not in contact or if circumstances change, showing that our attachment is more about avoiding the pain of abandonment than about true connection. Genuine commitment invites patience and space for growth, both for ourselves and the other person. It allows us to stand firm in our own sense of worth, trusting that we are enough even when we're not constantly in contact or when things aren't perfect. When we're motivated by genuine care, we can face difficult conversations or moments of uncertainty without feeling like our entire world is collapsing. On the other hand, fear-based attachment tends to be reactive, often triggering feelings of desperation or panic. It may lead us to compromise our boundaries or stay in situations that drain us because the thought of being alone feels worse than the discomfort of the ongoing unhealthy dynamic. Recognizing this distinction gives us the space to start making conscious choices about what kind of connection we truly want, one rooted in trust and authenticity, not in fear. One practical way to develop this awareness is to pause and ask, am I doing this because I genuinely want to, or because I'm afraid of what might happen if I don't? This simple question can open the door to clearer, more honest motivations. Over time, cultivating a practice of self-reflection helps us differentiate between love and fear, supporting us in building relationships that honor our well-being and encourage mutual growth instead of merely avoiding pain or abandonment. Practice. Where did I learn to disappear? If we want to understand why we sometimes fade into the background or hide parts of ourselves in relationships, It makes sense to start by exploring where this pattern originated. Often, these tendencies don't develop overnight. They are shaped by early experiences, family dynamics, and the messages we internalized long before we had the words to articulate what was happening. Reflecting on childhood and adolescence can reveal the moments when we learned that speaking up or asserting ourselves might lead to rejection, criticism, or emotional pain. Perhaps we grew up in environments where our feelings were dismissed, our ideas ignored, or our boundaries unvalued. Over time, these experiences can silently teach us that disappearing or silencing ourselves is the safest way to avoid conflict or rejection. As we look back, ask yourself, when did I start to feel that my voice wasn't wanted or that my presence was too much? Maybe it was a specific moment, like defending a point in school and being laughed at, or a recurring pattern, such as feeling ignored by caregivers when you expressed your needs. Recognizing these moments isn't about blaming, but about understanding how deeply these lessons sank into your subconscious. This awareness allows us to see that the tendency to disappear isn't a personal failing, but a learned response. It's as if, in some part of you, the message was, if I go quiet or invisible, I won't be hurt. Knowing this helps remove shame and instead fosters compassion for those parts of us that attempted to keep us safe long ago. Many of us unconsciously carry victories and wounds of these early lessons into our adult relationships. Perhaps we've found ourselves shrinking in conversations, avoiding conflict at all costs, or second-guessing our needs. These behaviors often act as a shield against vulnerability, but can also disconnect us from genuine intimacy. Through gentle inquiry, asking oneself questions like, when do I tend to disappear? Or, what thoughts and feelings push me to quiet down? We begin to unearth the beliefs fueling these habits. We might discover the voice in our heads that whispers, if I speak up, I'll be judged, or my feelings aren't important enough to share. Spotting these internal messages is the first step toward loosening their hold and reclaiming the parts of ourselves that have been muted for too long. Gently shedding light on these origins is an act of kindness and patience. It invites you to see yourself as a complex, evolving person who learned survival strategies early on. Remember, it's perfectly natural for our minds to develop patterns that protect us, even if those patterns no longer serve us in adulthood. Recognizing the roots helps us start to untangle those old beliefs from our present reality. It's like tracing your hand back to see where the fingers once extended, offering a clearer sense of how and where the patterns took hold. Once you begin to understand where your tendency to disappear comes from, the next step is to explore the beliefs hidden behind that behavior. Often, these are unspoken assumptions about ourselves and others, thoughts we've accepted as truth without realizing it. For example, you might believe that speaking up will lead to rejection, or that your feelings aren't valid enough to be shared. These beliefs quietly whisper in the background, influencing how you respond in moments of vulnerability. It's important to approach this process with gentle curiosity rather than judgment. Instead of trying to change overnight, recognize that these beliefs are part of a long-standing conversation within your mind, one that needs compassionate listening. Start by noticing the thoughts that appear when you feel the urge to withdraw or hide. Are you telling yourself you're too much, not enough, or better off silent? Do you assume others won't accept your needs or opinions? Writing these beliefs down can help you see their patterns more clearly. Often, these thoughts stem from earlier messages like my feelings cause trouble, or if I express myself, I'll be ignored. Once identified, remember that these are simply stories, not fixed truths. They're based on past experiences and limited perspectives that no longer need to control how you show up today. With patience, begin to gently challenge these beliefs. Ask yourself, is this true in all cases? Or what evidence do I have that contradicts this thought? For example, if you believe that sharing your feelings always leads to rejection, reflect on times when you were truly heard and accepted. Practice affirming your right to be seen and heard, even if it feels unfamiliar or uncomfortable. Over time, these small acts of gentle questioning can start to weaken the grip of old beliefs. They create space for new, kinder ideas to take root, such as my feelings are valid, or I am deserving of connection. This is not about forcing change, but about giving yourself permission to consider different possibilities and slowly reshape your inner dialogue. Remember, uncovering these beliefs isn't a quick fix. It's an ongoing process of peeling back layers with compassion and curiosity. Celebrate each moment of awareness when you catch yourself silencing your voice or holding back. Use these insights as gentle reminders that you are not alone in this journey and that every small step towards self-awareness is a victory. Sometimes, simply giving voice to these hidden beliefs is enough to start loosening their hold, allowing your true self to gradually emerge more confidently in your relationships. Chapter 3. The Symptoms of Self-Abandonment. Saying yes when you mean no. Understanding how this overcommitment pattern appears in everyday life is key. For instance, you might feel uncomfortable turning down an invitation, but say yes because you fear missing out or worry that declining might disappoint someone. Or perhaps you find yourself agreeing to extra work tasks, not because you genuinely want to, but because you want to maintain good standing or avoid conflict. This tendency can also show up in personal relationships, where you say yes to favors, even when they drain your energy or clash with your own priorities. When these behaviors become habitual, the act of overcommitting starts to chip away at your sense of self. You begin to feel like you are living the expectations others set for you rather than following your authentic desires. Recognizing these recurring patterns involves pausing in moments of decision, asking yourself why you want to agree, what your true capacity is, and whether saying yes aligns with your current needs. Reflecting on these questions gradually reveals the underlying fears or beliefs that keep you locked into these patterns. As you start noticing where you tend to say yes out of obligation rather than desire, you gain an opportunity to choose differently. One practical step is to keep a simple journal or mental note of such moments. Over time, this insight allows you to see the common triggers or emotional states that prompt overcommitment, creating space for more mindful and authentic choices. Breaking free from automatic yes is often about small, consistent shifts, learning to pause, breathe, and evaluate your true capacity before agreeing to anything. Constantly scanning for emotional shifts in others. When you're constantly tuned into other people's emotions and cues, it often feels like a part of you is on high alert. This hypervigilance means you're not just aware, but attuned in a way that keeps you always ready to respond, sometimes even before others express what they need or feel. You might find yourself scanning for subtle changes in facial expressions, tone of voice, or body language, trying to catch signals that indicate someone's mood is shifting. While this might seem like an act of kindness or caring on the surface, it can become exhausting when done repeatedly, leading to a feeling of walking on eggshells or being perpetually on edge. This constant monitoring often begins unconsciously. You may notice yourself thinking ahead, questioning whether someone is upset or if a conversation is heading in an uncomfortable direction. The more you practice this kind of alertness, the more you start to believe that your main responsibility is to keep everyone else comfortable and happy. It's easy to forget that this hyper-awareness isn't just about caring. It's often rooted in a desire to avoid conflict or rejection. Over time, this hypervigilant state can dull your ability to be present with your own feelings, creating a disconnect that leaves you feeling isolated even in social settings. Recognizing this tendency is the first step. You might observe yourself constantly asking, "What do they need from me right now?" Or "Are they upset?" without realizing how much mental energy you spend trying to decode every minor shift. This level of alertness can blur the lines between being empathetic and becoming overly reactive, which results in emotional fatigue. The effect is a kind of self-neglect. You are so busy watching for others' signals that yours get lost somewhere along the way. Becoming aware of this pattern can help you understand that your focus needs to shift from external monitoring to a healthier balance where you notice your own emotional state too. When you spend so much energy tuning into others, your own feelings often end up on the back burner. This relentless attention to everyone else's emotional well-being can make it difficult to identify what you're truly feeling underneath the surface. Instead of pausing to recognize your own needs or emotional responses, you may have learned to suppress or ignore them, deeming them less urgent or less valid. The habit of constantly being attentive to others' moods can create a kind of emotional tunnel vision, where your internal world becomes faint or even inaccessible. This disconnect can manifest as a sense of numbness or emotional flatness. You might find yourself answering questions politely, yet feeling disconnected from what's really going on inside. It's like watching your own life from outside your body. You're aware of your thoughts and reactions, but they feel distant or overshadowed by the need to manage others' feelings. Over time, this can erode your understanding of what you truly need for yourself, leading to a lack of self-awareness or difficulty recognizing when you're overwhelmed, anxious, or feeling unfulfilled. The more you neglect your own emotional landscape, the less accurate your internal compass becomes, which only fuels the cycle of hypervigilance and disconnection. Understanding this process allows you to see how the constant monitoring is not just about being considerate, but also about avoiding discomfort within yourself. When you're hyper-focused on others, your own feelings become just noise or distractions, rather than signals that need your attention. This can lead to emotional exhaustion, as you're constantly giving energy outward while neglecting your inner world. Recognizing the signs of this disconnection is key. Noticing when you're tuning out your own feelings or feeling numb after social interactions can provide vital clues about how much your attention is skewed externally versus internally. Once aware, you can begin to gently explore what you truly need, giving yourself permission to prioritize your feelings alongside the needs of others. Feeling responsible for how people feel. Many of us have experienced moments where we feel responsible for how someone else feels, almost as if their mood or struggles become our personal mission. This tendency often stems from a desire to help, to feel useful, or simply from a deep empathy that makes it hard to stand back when we see someone hurting. It feels natural to want to ease someone's pain, to cheer up a friend, or to fix a difficult situation. But what starts as compassion can sometimes turn into an unspoken obligation to carry the emotional weight of others, leading us to take on feelings that aren't truly ours. Over time, this can create an internal emotional imbalance, leaving us drained and disconnected from our own needs. Recognizing this pattern is the first step toward freeing ourselves from the silent burden of trying to fix what isn't ours to control. It's important to ask ourselves if we feel responsible because we genuinely want to help, or because we believe we alone must shoulder their pain in order to keep the peace or feel valued. This tendency is often rooted in underlying beliefs that equate kindness with taking on others' suffering, or that see emotional suffering as something to be managed personally. It can be reinforced by cultural or familial messages, perhaps a parent who always worked to fix conflicts, or a community where showing emotion was viewed as a personal failing. When we adopt these beliefs unconsciously, we start to see ourselves as the sole source of comfort and stability for people around us. Meanwhile, the other person's emotional well-being becomes intertwined with our own identity or sense of worth. As a result, we might go out of our way to avoid conflict, suppress our own feelings, or deny our limits, thinking that this is part of being a caring person. Yet, taking on others' emotional burdens can also inadvertently enable dependency, diminish boundaries, and strip us of the clarity needed to focus on our own emotional health. One of the hardest lessons in emotional health is understanding that we cannot change how someone else feels, no matter how much we want to. When we believe that our efforts or presence can alter another person's suffering, we set ourselves up for frustration and burnout. It's essential to realize that each individual carries their own emotional weight, shaped by their history, choices, and perceptions. While we can offer support, kindness, and presence, we cannot dictate how they respond or how they internalize their experiences. Accepting this can be an uncomfortable shift, especially for those who are used to trying to fix everything. It requires recognizing that pain and happiness are internal states, influenced by factors beyond our control. Our role becomes one of compassionate witness, rather than an overextended fixer. It's helpful to see that trying to control or manage others' feelings can actually undermine genuine empathy. When we attempt to manipulate someone's emotional state, whether through excessive reassurance, advice, or even silence, we risk invalidating their experience or making them feel misunderstood. Instead, a more supportive approach involves holding space for their feelings without trying to change them. For example, if a friend is upset about a loss, instead of offering solutions or minimizing their pain, simply acknowledge their feelings and let them express what they need. By doing so, we both honor their experience and protect our own emotional boundaries. Remember, true care involves compassion without attachment to a specific outcome or the need for validation. Learning to detach from the outcome of others' emotions allows us to focus on our own emotional health and helps others develop their own resilience. Practically, this means being honest with ourselves about what we can and cannot do. We can listen, comfort, and support, but we cannot heal or fix someone else's internal struggles. It's also about recognizing that feelings like happiness or sadness come from within, influenced by countless factors outside our control. When we step into the role of emotional caretaker, we might feel useful or necessary, but we often lose sight of the fact that everyone has their own path to navigate. Giving ourselves permission to stay in our own lane can be profoundly freeing and creates healthier relational dynamics. Encouraging others to take responsibility for their feelings, rather than taking that responsibility on ourselves, nurtures mutual respect and emotional independence. A practical tip here is to develop a habit of gently observing your reactions when friends or loved ones share their feelings. Notice if you feel compelled to solve, change, or fix their pain, or if you simply want to listen and be present. If the latter, trust that your presence alone can be enough without adding layers of effort or guilt. This small shift enhances your emotional boundaries and helps you cultivate a healthier balance between empathy and over-involvement. Ultimately, caring for ourselves in this way creates space for genuine compassion, both for others and for our own emotional well-being. Recognizing that everyone has their own emotional journey is a cornerstone for developing compassion without ownership. Losing hobbies, opinions, and space in relationships. Gently exploring how to reintroduce your interests and boundaries involves approaching yourself with compassion and patience. Start by creating small spaces in your daily routine where your preferences are prioritized, even if just for a few minutes. For example, decide to spend a short period engaging in an activity that brings you joy, like reading, drawing, or walking without any external demands. This isn't about forcing big changes immediately, but nurturing the idea that your passions deserve attention. As you begin to reconnect with what excites or relaxes you, explore your feelings around boundaries. What is acceptable and what isn't? Some relationships become a battleground for boundaries because we're used to silencing our needs to keep the peace. Gently identify areas where you feel your voice has been muted, and start practicing speaking up for yourself, even in small ways. This can be as simple as expressing a preference or saying no when something doesn't feel right. Over time, these small steps build confidence and clarity, gradually reinforcing your right to your own space and opinions. Remember, re-engaging with your interests and boundaries isn't about change overnight, but about creating gentle, consistent trust in your ability to honor yourself. With patience, these acts become natural parts of your life, helping you remember who you are beyond the roles and obligations you've taken on. One practical way to start this journey is to reflect regularly on what genuinely excites or interests you, separate from your relationship or social expectations. Keep a simple journal, noting what activities bring you happiness or peace, and which feelings arise when you think about asserting your needs. As you gain insight, experiment with small acts that honor these desires, like setting aside a regular time for a hobby or expressing your opinion during a discussion. It's also helpful to remind yourself that your voice matters and that your passions are not frivolous. They are integral parts of who you are. Trusting yourself enough to pursue what feels genuine can be empowering, and this process can also improve your relationships by fostering authenticity and respect. Remember, reclaiming your passions and boundaries isn't about creating distance or conflict, but about aligning your life with your true self. Take these gentle steps and allow yourself the space to grow into a person who values not only others but also herself or himself equally, recognizing that your joy and voice are worth protecting and nourishing. Practicing mindfulness during this process can help you stay rooted and compassionate, even when it feels unfamiliar or uncomfortable at first. Chapter 4. The Fantasy versus the Reality. Loving who they could be, not who they are. Many times, we find ourselves attracted to the idea of who someone could become rather than who they truly are in the present moment. It's easy to focus on qualities that seem promising, bright future prospects, hidden talents, or even the hopes we hold for personal growth. But this tendency can create a kind of fog that blurs the real picture, making it hard to see someone's true self clearly. When we look at others through this lens, we might overlook their current struggles, limitations, or even behaviors that aren't serving either of us. It's as if we're holding onto a fantasy, a person painted with hopeful strokes, but neglecting the genuine, sometimes imperfect details that exist now. This pattern often starts with good intentions, like wanting to help someone improve or believing in their potential to change. However, it can slip into a form of avoidance, avoiding acceptance of the present because it feels uncomfortable or less hopeful. The problem becomes more evident when our expectations clash with reality. Maybe someone isn't ready to change, or perhaps they're just not what we imagined. If we only see potential and refuse to accept what is, we risk building relationships on dreams and assumptions rather than authentic connection. Over time, this can lead to disappointment, frustration, and even a sense of betrayal when the person doesn't conform to the ideal we envisioned. Being honest with ourselves about this tendency is a first step. Recognizing that we're often more comfortable with possibility than with what actually is can help us pause and reflect. It means asking whether we're truly accepting the other person or just clinging to a version of them we want to see. Taking time to notice what filters influence our perceptions, such as hope, fear, or insecurity, can uncover patterns that keep us in a state of wishful thinking. Sometimes, our attachment to potential stems from deep fears of abandonment or feelings of inadequacy, which push us to hold on to promises of growth that the other person may never fulfill. When we become aware of this, we can choose to embrace reality more fully, respecting the person as they are now without the pressure of who they might someday become. Accepting others as they are requires a gentle shift from trying to fix or change them to embracing their current self. It involves cultivating patience and understanding, recognizing that growth and change are gradual processes that exist on their own timeline. This doesn't mean we have to accept unacceptable behaviors or set aside our boundaries, but it does mean we approach others with a mindset of curiosity instead of judgment. When we see someone clearly, we start to appreciate their strengths, quirks, and imperfections without the need to mold them into a version we find more appealing. This kind of love is honest and grounded, allowing us to build relationships based on authenticity rather than illusion. One way to practice this is by focusing on what we genuinely appreciate about someone, rather than what we wish they would become. For example, if a friend has a habit of procrastination but is highly kind and funny in their current state, loving them as they are means cherishing those qualities without wishing they were more disciplined immediately. When we shift our view in this way, we also give others room to be themselves without the pressure to meet unspoken expectations. This creates a sense of safety and trust, making it easier for genuine connection to grow. Over time, loving someone as they are can also help us loosen our attachments to false ideals, freeing us to experience real intimacy rooted in acceptance. Practicing acceptance often begins with inner honesty, acknowledging our own tendencies to judge or wish for change. It's about recognizing that everyone, including ourselves, is on a journey marked by imperfections and progress. We can remind ourselves that love isn't about fixing. It's about holding space and offering kindness as others evolve at their own pace. This mindful approach helps us develop patience and compassion, making it easier to accept the messy, beautiful reality of who others truly are. Ultimately, loving as it is, without conditions, creates a more peaceful heart and a deeper connection that isn't dependent on future possibilities, but rooted in present truth. Remember, one practical step to embody this kind of love is setting aside time to genuinely listen without planning how to respond or what to fix. Pay close attention to who they are right now, what makes them unique, what struggles they openly share, and what brings them joy in their current state. By focusing on this present moment understanding, your love can become a steady foundation that accommodates change naturally, without force or expectation. Doing so doesn't mean you give up on growth, but that you honor the process instead of rushing or resisting it. This approach transforms our relationships from these fragile attempts to mold others into a gentle space where authenticity and love can flourish. Getting high on potential. When we think about hopes and dreams, it's easy to get caught up in the rush that comes with imagining what could be. That feeling of anticipation, the adrenaline of potential, often makes us cling tightly to what seems just within reach, yet remains unfulfilled. This emotional high can become addictive because it gives us a sense of excitement and purpose, even if we're not taking real steps forward. We tell ourselves stories that keep hope alive, stories about future successes, ideal scenarios, or perfect situations, and each of these stories stirs a wave of longing in our chest. That longing, although rooted in longing for something better, also creates a kind of emotional buzz that can overshadow the here and now. It's not just about dreaming. It's about reliving the same feelings of possibility over and over again, which makes us feel alive and hopeful even when nothing has changed. This attachment to unmet possibilities often becomes a comfort zone, even if it's an unintentional one. We might be aware deep down that the reality doesn't match our hopes, but the emotional excitement helps us avoid facing that disconnect. It's a way of holding on to future promises without the vulnerability of actually making steps toward them. This emotional rush can create a momentum that keeps us stuck in a cycle of anticipation, working against any sense of peace with what is. The desire for something better becomes intertwined with an ongoing excitement, not necessarily related to achievement, but to the momentary high of imagining what might be. That's why it can feel so hard to let go of hope, because the feeling of hope itself starts to seem like the only thing that sustains us in uncertain times. Being caught up in the emotional allure of hope has a way of pulling us away from what is happening right now. While we're busy dreaming of future successes or better days, we often overlook the life that is unfolding in the present. This distraction comes with a price. Instead of fully experiencing our current feelings, surroundings, or the small moments that matter, we get caught in mental stories about what could and should be. It's akin to walking around with eyes fixed on the horizon, missing the beauty of the step right beneath our feet. When hope becomes a constant source of mental distraction, it can lead us to ignore our actual needs, emotions, and the simple joys of now for the promise of some distant outcome that may or may not happen. The mind tends to latch onto the idea that future success or fulfillment will bring happiness, but this creates a perpetual waiting game. Meanwhile, day-to-day life slips by. Conversations with loved ones, moments of calm, small acts of gratitude, all replaced by fantasies of a better future. This ongoing mental activity prevents us from grounding ourselves in the present, which is where real peace and clarity reside. The more we focus on unmet possibilities, the less space we create for appreciating what we already have. It's a subtle but significant way we get sidetracked, because our attention gets caught up in the stories of what might be, diverting us from acknowledging what is. Over time, this keeps us distant from our current feelings and anxieties, making it harder to find contentment in the everyday. To start shifting out of this cycle, it can help to recognize when the mind is drifting into hopeful fantasies that drain attention from the now. Practicing gentle awareness, simply noticing when your thoughts are tethered to future outcomes, can create some space. Summoning a moment of pause allows you to ask yourself, am I here right now? What am I feeling? This simple check-in can gradually teach your mind that hope isn't always about escaping into what might be, but rather about appreciating and acknowledging what actually is present. Building this practice might feel small at first, but over time, it opens a door to more genuine engagement with life as it unfolds. Remember, hope itself isn't wrong. It's the way we cling to it that can trap us. Knowing when to gently release the emotional need for unmet possibilities creates room for acceptance. Acceptance that the present has its own quiet value, even if it doesn't match the vivid stories we tell ourselves about the future. It's about learning to enjoy the flow of life without constantly searching for a splash of excitement in what remains outside our reach. Mistaking intensity for intimacy. Often, people confuse the intensity of their feelings during a heated moment with the depth of their connection. When someone sparks strong emotions, whether through a fiery argument, an electrifying night, or a sudden rush of infatuation, it can feel like real intimacy is blossoming. But what's really happening in those instances is more about adrenaline and excitement than true closeness. Passion can surge in a heartbeat, igniting a sense of being truly alive, but it doesn't necessarily mean you understand each other on a core level or trust each other deeply. It's important to recognize that this energy, while compelling, often masks underlying insecurities or unmet needs that haven't been addressed. Genuine intimacy, on the other hand, grows slowly, built on trust, mutual vulnerability, and consistent care over time. Think of it like a fire versus a steady flame. A fire can be powerful and mesmerizing, but it burns hot and fast. It calls attention and can even be dangerous if not handled carefully. A steady flame might not grab attention instantly, but it provides warmth and light that lasts. When we mistake passionate upheaval for authentic connection, we risk chasing after that flame without realizing it's temporary. We might find ourselves caught up in the highs and lows of intense emotions, believing they are signals of closeness, when actually they're just sensations of excitement. True intimacy, by contrast, feels quieter and more stable. It's in the calm after the storm, in knowing that no matter how turbulent times get, there's a foundation of trust underneath. This distinction becomes especially clear when you pause to reflect on your feelings and the relationship. Ask yourself whether these intense moments leave you feeling grounded and understood, or if they leave you drained and confused. Passion often leaves a trail of adrenaline, making your heart race in the moment, but not necessarily fostering a sense of safety or security. Genuine connection, however, enriches your life with a feeling of being seen and accepted for who you truly are. When you start paying closer attention, you'll notice that the spark of passion can sometimes ignite without much mutual understanding, whereas real intimacy requires time and vulnerability to develop. Recognizing this difference can prevent you from mistaking temporary excitement for a deep, lasting bond. One of the most helpful steps in discerning the difference is to take intentional pauses, especially during emotionally charged moments. Instead of rushing in or reacting impulsively, give yourself permission to step back and observe what's unfolding. This might mean simply noticing how your body feels. Are you tensing up, or do you feel a sense of calm? Are the intense feelings driven by a desire for immediate validation or reassurance, or do they come from a place of genuine curiosity and openness? When emotions run high, it's easy to mistake that rush of sensation for closeness. But if you slow down, you'll start to see that genuine intimacy develops gradually over shared experiences, respectful communication, and vulnerability that is felt over time rather than during momentary flashes. Practicing mindfulness during these moments helps create that space for clarity. Ask yourself questions like, is this feeling rooted in trust, or is it just fear of being alone or unseen? Or are we connecting on a deeper level, or just riding the waves of emotion? Sometimes, simply naming what you're experiencing, whether it's excitement, anxiety, or longing, removes some of its power. You might find that what initially felt like deep connection was actually fueled by shared chaos or mutual passion without a foundation of understanding. When you develop this habit of pausing and reflecting, you make room for genuine connection to emerge and become clearer, rather than getting swept away by the rush of emotion that can distort your perception. Another key aspect is to observe the consistency of your interactions. Genuine relationships aren't built solely on spontaneous sparks. They depend on sustained effort, honest conversations, and mutual support. If you notice that intense feelings appear only during moments of conflict or excitement, but are absent during quieter times, it's a sign that what you're experiencing is more about emotional highs than authentic closeness. Conversely, if you find that your connection persists through difficult conversations and down times, it's probably rooted in something more stable. When you learn to differentiate between these two, you can start choosing relationships that nurture and sustain you, instead of ones that simply excite you temporarily. Practice reality check journaling, what I hoped versus what's real. This exercise begins with a simple but powerful idea, recognizing the gap between what we wish for in our relationships and what is actually happening. Sometimes, our minds tend to create stories or ideal images of how things should be, whether it's about our partner, friends, or family. These hopes are often rooted in our desires for connection, safety, or validation. But when these hopes go unmet or clash with reality, it can cause confusion, frustration, and emotional distress. Practicing this exercise helps you slow down and observe your inner landscape without judgment, gently revealing the difference between your expectations and what is real. To start, find a quiet space where you can reflect without interruptions. Take a few deep breaths, allowing yourself to settle into the present moment. You might want to keep a journal nearby or just a blank sheet of paper. Begin by recalling a specific relationship or interaction that has stirred up feelings recently. Focus on what you had hoped would happen or what you wished the other person's behavior or attitude would be like. Write down these hopes honestly, without editing yourself. It's okay if they feel idealistic or unrealistic. This is about understanding your own inner expectations. Once you've identified your hopes, shift your attention to what actually happened or what is presently true. Be as objective as possible, describing the situation without judgment or blame. Notice the differences. This might be a simple phrase like, I hoped they would listen more, versus they seemed distracted and didn't pay much attention. For many, this process can be illuminating, as it highlights patterns of expecting more than what's actually happening. Remember, this exercise isn't a way to criticize yourself or others, but to foster awareness. When you see where your hopes diverge from reality, you're creating space for honest acknowledgement and gentle acceptance. Over time, this practice helps you develop a more realistic perspective, reducing the likelihood of future disappointment rooted in unmet expectations. It encourages you to be honest about your desires while accepting what is. This approach also fosters compassion, not just for yourself, but for others too. Seeing the truth of a situation as it is, rather than through filters of longing or idealism, allows relationships to function with greater clarity and authenticity. As you continue this practice, you may find that your emotional reactions soften because you're no longer fighting against what's present. Instead, you're embracing it with kindness and understanding. This exercise serves as a bridge to reconnect you with reality, especially when your mind creates stories that distort what's happening. Often, we cling to our hopes because they make us feel safe or hopeful about the future, but they can also lead us away from the truth of the present moment. By regularly checking in with yourself and doing this kind of honest assessment, you empower yourself to see your relationships more clearly. When you acknowledge the real state of affairs, rather than an idealized version, you reduce the risk of disappointment and set the stage for more genuine interactions. This practice invites you to pause and ask questions like, what do I really want in this situation? Is my hope rooted in something realistic? What is actually happening right now? These questions can feel simple on the surface, but open up a space for deep reflection. Many people find that when they do this regularly, they notice recurring patterns, places where their hopes consistently surpass what's truly present. Recognizing these patterns is the first step toward adjusting your expectations gently and kindly. It's about creating a more honest dialogue between your inner world and the outer realities of your relationships. Learning to ground your perceptions is especially helpful during challenging moments when emotions run high. Instead of reacting impulsively or with blame, you begin to see the situation more clearly. For example, if a friend cancels plans, instead of rushing to assumptions like they don't value me, you can check in with what your hope was, spending quality time together, versus what actually occurred, they had an emergency. This clarity diminishes feelings of hurt and helps you respond from a place of truth. Over time, this practice can become a form of emotional practice, training your mind to observe without attaching to stories that distort reality. Ultimately, the goal is to cultivate a gentle honesty within yourself, where your hopes are acknowledged but not enforced as truths. This creates a firm foundation for healthier relationships, built on mutual understanding rather than unmet expectations. Remember, this process is not about perfection, but about transparency. Every time you pause to check in, you strengthen your ability to stay present and grounded, knowing that the only moment truly in your control is the one you're living. As you get more comfortable with facing what is, your inner landscape becomes steadier, and your interactions become more authentic. A practical tip to integrate this awareness into daily life is to set a regular reminder. Perhaps once a day, pause for a minute and reflect on one relationship or situation. Ask yourself, what did I hope for? What is actually happening? Writing down the insights can reinforce this new perspective. With consistency, this practice turns into a gentle habit that nurtures your emotional clarity and helps you walk through life with a clearer, more compassionate view of yourself and others. Chapter 5. Boundaries aren't walls, they're oxygen. Why setting boundaries feels like betrayal at first. Many of us hesitate to set boundaries because we worry they might create distance or even cause pain. It's a natural fear. No one wants to be seen as rejecting or abandoning someone they care about. We often imagine boundaries as walls that shut people out, leading to feelings of loneliness and guilt. This fear can be so strong that it keeps us from acting in our own best interest, even when we know deep down that boundaries are necessary. It's important to recognize that this anxiety usually comes from a place of caring, but it also reveals a misunderstanding about what boundaries truly do. Boundaries aren't about pushing people away. They're about protecting ourselves so we can be more authentic and present in our relationships. When we believe setting boundaries means rejection, it becomes difficult to take those first steps. We might worry that saying no will hurt someone's feelings or damage the connection we share. Sometimes, we interpret others' reactions as personal betrayals, making us hesitant to express our needs. The fear is often rooted in our desire to be liked or accepted, leading us to put everyone else's needs before our own. But this mindset can cause resentment and exhaustion over time, making boundaries not just necessary, but vital for our well-being. Recognizing this fear as part of a common emotional experience helps us understand that feeling uncomfortable at first doesn't mean we're damaging relationships. It simply signals the need for honest communication and self-trust. It can be helpful to reflect on past experiences where setting boundaries didn't cause harm. Often, we discover that truth through our own lives or stories from people around us. For example, think about a time when you needed rest, but felt guilty turning down an invitation. When you finally said no, you might have worried about disappointing others, but in reality, they understood and appreciated your honesty. These moments reveal a pattern. Most fears about boundaries are rooted in assumptions that may not match reality. By gradually examining these fears and testing small boundaries, we learn that our concerns about hurting others tend to be more about our own feelings of vulnerability than any actual threat to relationships. Recognizing this distinction allows us to confront fears with compassion and curiosity, easing the way toward healthier boundaries. Setting boundaries is often misunderstood as a rejection of others, but in truth, it's a profound act of self-respect. When you clearly communicate what feels right for you, you're honoring your needs, values, and limits. This isn't about pushing people away or making grand statements. It's about acknowledging your own thresholds and giving yourself permission to be honest. Boundaries shape the foundation for genuine relationships because they create clarity and mutual respect. They tell others, "This is who I am, what I can give, and what I can't," which encourages healthier, more sustainable connections. It's also a way of taking responsibility for your own well-being rather than neglecting yourself to keep others happy. Many times, people fear that boundaries will be perceived as rejection, yet those same boundaries often open space for deeper trust. For example, setting a boundary around needing quiet time after work communicates that you value your mental health. It may seem small, but it's a powerful declaration of self-care. When others see that you respect yourself enough to state your needs, they often respond positively, feeling more secure in the relationship. Boundaries demonstrate that you're not trying to push people away, but rather creating healthy limits that allow the relationship to thrive without one person sacrificing their own well-being. By viewing boundaries through this lens, we shift from fear-based avoidance to conscious self-love, making them an act of kindness, not rejection. This shift in perspective can be reinforced by noticing how setting boundaries benefits both parties. For instance, a friend who respects your time by not constantly demanding immediate responses appreciates your honesty. Over time, these honest exchanges deepen trust, as both people learn they can depend on each other's sincerity and respect. With practice, boundaries become less about confrontation and more about shared understanding. They are a way to ensure that our relationships are built on honesty and mutual care, giving everyone involved the space they need to feel secure. Remember, the goal isn't perfection but consistency, showing yourself and others that respecting your limits is an act of love that enriches all connections involved. As you start to see boundaries as an essential form of respect, you may find it easier to communicate them calmly and kindly. When a boundary feels difficult, remind yourself that it's not an act of rejection, but a declaration of your authenticity. The process involves patience and compassion, to yourself and others, as boundaries are learned and integrated into your life. Keep in mind that every step you take toward honoring yourself is also a step toward creating more genuine, resilient relationships. Over time, you'll notice that respecting your boundaries encourages others to do the same, fostering a cycle of mutual respect and understanding. Giving yourself permission to prioritize your well-being isn't selfish. It's an act of courage that nurtures healthier, more fulfilling connections. Saying, "I can't carry that" without guilt. Knowing how to say no or "I can't" without feeling like you're letting someone down is a skill that takes practice and patience. Often, we learn early on to please others or avoid conflict, so setting boundaries can feel uncomfortable or selfish. Yet, speaking your limits honestly, but gently, is essential for maintaining your mental and emotional health. It starts with understanding that your needs and feelings are valid, and that communicating them clearly helps others respect your boundaries. When you tell someone, "I can't take on that project right now," it's more helpful to add, "I want to do a good job, and I don't want to let you down, but I'm overwhelmed at the moment." This kind of honesty not only clarifies what you can offer, but also shows that your decision is rooted in care, not avoidance or indifference. Practice framing your responses in a way that emphasizes your own needs without criticizing others. For example, saying, "I really want to help, but I've reached my limit," communicates your boundary while still showing your willingness to support in the future. Over time, this consistent honesty teaches others that your limits are positive boundaries, not barriers to friendship or cooperation. It's also worth reminding ourselves that saying no is a form of respect for ourselves and others, because it avoids resentment, burnout, and misaligned expectations. The goal is to express what you need calmly and clearly, so that others can understand and respect your space without feeling rejected or judged. Remember, setting boundaries is not about shutting people out, but about creating healthy, honest relationships where everyone's needs are acknowledged. Letting go of the guilt that tells you to always say yes. Many of us carry a deep-rooted guilt about saying no, often fueled by societal messages that imply being helpful or agreeable is a moral duty. We may worry that turning someone down makes us appear selfish or unreliable, which adds a heavy layer of guilt to an already difficult decision. The truth is, this guilt is often an illusion. It's a voice we've internalized that doesn't serve our well-being. When you constantly say yes to keep the peace or to avoid disappointing others, you stretch yourself thin and diminish your own happiness. Recognizing this pattern requires gentle honesty. The more you say yes out of obligation rather than genuine willingness, the more resentful or exhausted you might feel. The process of releasing guilt involves examining where it originates, whether from childhood, societal expectations, or personal fears, and challenging those beliefs. One way to start is by reminding yourself that you cannot pour from an empty cup. Setting boundaries is an act of self-respect and empowers you to be more present and truly helpful when you do choose to say yes. You can also practice reframing your thoughts. Instead of seeing a refusal as selfish, view it as a gift you give yourself, a gift that allows you to show up more authentically in your relationships. It's helpful to keep in mind that not everyone will understand or agree with your choices right away, and that's okay. What matters is that your decisions align with your values and limits, rather than the lingering guilt that pushes you to overextend yourself. Over time, allowing yourself to say no without guilt paves the way for more genuine, balanced connections and an inner peace that doesn't hinge on everyone's approval. Building self-compassion is key. Acknowledging that your needs deserve as much respect as anyone else's can finally free you from the guilt that has long held you hostage. Scripts for kind, clear, non-defensive communication. Learning to communicate boundaries without feeling guilty or confrontational begins with having a few gentle phrases at your fingertips. These templates act like soft scaffolding, helping you express your needs clearly while keeping the tone kind and non-judgmental. For instance, instead of saying, "You can't do that," you might say, "I feel overwhelmed when this happens, and I'd appreciate if we could find a different way." Such language acknowledges your feelings without assigning blame, opening space for understanding rather than defensiveness. Practice these phrases in your mind or aloud, so they become natural tools to use when boundaries are necessary. The key is to speak from your own experience, focusing on how you feel instead of what the other person is doing wrong. This approach helps you stand firm while remaining compassionate, making it easier for others to hear you without feeling criticized. Using gentle language templates also means being prepared for various situations where boundaries are tested. Whether it's requesting more personal space, declining an unwanted favor, or expressing your limits in emotional conversations, framing your words kindly can make all the difference. For example, instead of saying, "No, I won't do that," you might say, "Thanks for thinking of me, but I need to step back from this right now." Subtle changes like replacing commands with polite requests or explanations create an atmosphere of cooperation rather than confrontation. Over time, these templates help you practice consistency and confidence, fostering a mindset that setting boundaries is a form of self-care that's respectful both to yourself and to others. Remember, the goal isn't to punish or dismiss, but to communicate your needs clearly and kindly, opening a door for empathy and connection rather than resistance. It's helpful to keep a small collection of these templates in mind ahead of conversations. When you anticipate a challenging situation, take a moment to choose your words thoughtfully. This premeditation reduces the chance of reacting emotionally and instead allows you to respond with calm clarity. For example, if someone consistently crosses your boundaries by interrupting you, you could say, "I need a moment to finish my thought, and I'd appreciate your patience." If someone asks for more than you can give, a simple, "I can't commit to that right now, but thank you for asking," maintains respect while honoring your limits. These small shifts in language support your confidence and help others see boundaries as a natural, respectful part of your interactions. Remember, setting habits around gentle language periodically transforms into a natural way of communicating your needs without friction or shame. Being honest with others often feels complicated because we worry about how our words might be received. The challenge isn't only about telling the truth, but doing so in a way that doesn't sound accusing or self-critical. Practicing honest communication starts with tuning into your own feelings and recognizing that your truth is valid, even when it's not what others want to hear. It's about expressing what's real for you without sugarcoating or feeling guilty. For example, if someone makes a request that you're unsure about, instead of giving a vague or defensive response, you could say, "I appreciate you asking, but I need some time to think about that," or "That's not something I feel comfortable doing right now." These responses show honesty while maintaining a respectful, non-defensive tone. The key is to avoid framing your truth as an attack and instead view it as an act of self-respect and authenticity. It's common to feel shame or defensiveness when sharing difficult truths, especially if we worry about disappointing others or being judged. To counter these feelings, practice framing your honesty as a reflection of your current state, not a critique of others. This can be as simple as stating, "I'm feeling overwhelmed today, so I might not be as available as usual," which communicates your reality without making it about someone else. When you speak honestly, try to focus on I statements rather than you accusations, which tend to put people on the defensive. For example, instead of saying, "You don't listen to me," try, "I feel unheard when I don't get a response." This approach keeps the conversation grounded in your experience and prevents it from turning into a blame game. With practice, honesty becomes a tool for genuine connection rather than a source of anxiety or shame, helping you build relationships based on trust and openness. In situations where your truth might trigger strong reactions from others, it's helpful to acknowledge your discomfort while staying committed to honesty. You can say, "It's hard for me to share this, but I need to be honest about how I feel." This simple acknowledgement creates space for understanding and sets a tone of respect. Remember, honesty isn't about being brutally frank or perfect. It's about being real and gentle with yourself and others. Over time, regularly practicing honest communication without judgment or defensiveness reinforces your confidence and helps develop deeper, more authentic connections. The more you see honesty as an act of kindness to yourself and others, the easier it becomes to share your truth with clarity and compassion, even amidst emotional discomfort or fear of rejection. Practice micro-boundary moments. Learning to set boundaries often begins with those small, everyday moments that might seem insignificant at first. It could be telling a colleague that you're not available for work emails after hours, politely declining an invitation that doesn't resonate with your plans, or simply saying no when someone asks for a favor that stretches you too thin. These micro-boundary moments help you practice asserting yourself without feeling overwhelmed. The key is to recognize those tiny opportunities where your voice can be heard and your limits acknowledged, gradually building the confidence to handle more challenging situations later. Remember, each small step is a genuine act of self-respect and creates a foundation for stronger boundaries over time. Starting small also means being attentive to your feelings in these moments. When you sense discomfort or feeling pushed beyond what feels right, take a moment to pause. Asking yourself, "Am I okay with this?" or "Does this align with my values?" allows you to tune into what your boundaries are. At first, it might be uncomfortable to say no or to voice your needs, but with practice, these responses become more natural. What matters most is consistency. Every time you assert yourself in minor ways, you reinforce your ability to do so in bigger, more intimidating situations. These small acts create a ripple effect, gradually transforming your sense of what's acceptable and empowering you to stand more firmly for yourself. For example, imagine you're at a family gathering and someone starts joking about a personal topic you're uncomfortable discussing. Instead of staying silent or laughing along, politely but firmly saying, "I'd prefer not to talk about that," sets a clear boundary. Or perhaps a friend repeatedly borrows your things without asking. Addressing this by gently saying, "I'd appreciate it if you ask before taking my belongings," establishes a simple yet effective limit. Such moments, though seemingly minor, reinforce your right to be heard and respected. The goal isn't perfection but progress. Each tiny boundary-setting act adds to your understanding of what's acceptable for you and helps you build the muscle needed to navigate more complex interactions. Once you've practiced asserting boundaries in small ways, the next step is to expand that confidence gradually. It's natural to feel some hesitation or even fear when considering setting boundaries in more personal or challenging situations. To move forward, try to reflect on your past successful boundary-setting moments and use them as evidence that you are capable. Building confidence involves recognizing that your needs are valid and that your voice deserves to be heard. Starting with low-stakes situations helps desensitize the fear so you can approach more difficult conversations with a calmer mindset. The idea is not to become perfect overnight, but to develop a pattern of showing up for yourself more consistently. Gradually increasing the complexity of boundary setting involves small steps like expressing your needs in intimate relationships or negotiating your work hours more assertively. For instance, if you've been uncomfortable declining a request that encroaches on your personal time, now is the moment to practice saying, "I can't commit to that right now, but thank you for thinking of me." Over time, as you witness positive responses and feel more at ease, you'll gain trust in your ability to handle more substantial boundaries. Remember, confidence grows from repeated experiences. The more you practice, the more your inner voice affirms that your boundaries matter and that you are deserving of respect. As you expand your boundary-setting skills, pay attention to your emotional responses. Notice which situations trigger feelings of anxiety or guilt, and consider what beliefs or assumptions might be fueling those emotions. Often, our fears about disappointing others or being seen as difficult hold us back. Challenging these beliefs gently, reminding yourself that healthy boundaries are essential and that setting them is an act of care, strengthens your resolve. Over time, you'll find that boundary setting becomes less about convincing others and more about honoring yourself. It's like building a muscle. With patience and persistence, you'll notice that larger, more challenging boundaries feel less intimidating, and setting them becomes a natural part of your interactions. Practicing honesty and kindness simultaneously helps solidify your confidence. When you communicate boundaries, speak clearly and authentically, focusing on your feelings rather than blaming or criticizing others. For example, saying, "I need to prioritize my well-being and won't be able to stay longer," instead of "you're pushing me too hard," creates a safer space for dialogue. Recognize that not everyone may respond positively right away, but staying consistent with your boundaries sends a strong message about your limits. Building confidence in boundary setting is a gradual process. Each small success adds to your sense of agency, making it easier to stand firm in more significant situations over time. Chapter 6: The Guilt Loop and the Need to Be Good. Why guilt shows up even when you're doing what's healthy. Many people grow up in environments where caring for oneself can inadvertently become intertwined with feelings of guilt. For some, this connection stems from cultural beliefs that emphasize sacrifice, productivity, or putting others first. For instance, individuals raised with the message that their worth depends on how much they do for others might see taking time for themselves as selfish or lazy. Over time, these ingrained ideas become internal scripts that subtly influence how we view our own needs, making self-care feel like an act of wrongdoing rather than kindness towards ourselves. Even when you consciously know that caring for your health is necessary, these deep-seated messages can quietly override that understanding, leading to feelings of guilt. On a personal level, these messages aren't always explicitly spoken. They often live beneath the surface, woven into family dynamics, cultural norms, and societal expectations. For example, if your family celebrated self-denial or viewed asking for help as a sign of weakness, those attitudes can shape your internal voice. You might find yourself associating rest or leisure with laziness or selfishness, especially when you see others around you working tirelessly without guilt. These patterns are reinforced by media portrayals that equate hard work with virtue and relaxation with complacency. Recognizing where these messages originate is the first step toward untangling them, as it allows you to see that guilt associated with self-care isn't rooted in truth, but rather in learned, often outdated beliefs. This awareness can be empowering because it opens the door to question these messages and decide for yourself what is healthy and right. When you notice feelings of guilt emerging as you prioritize yourself, pause and reflect on where those feelings might be coming from. Are they echoes of childhood beliefs, cultural expectations, or societal pressures? Understanding their origins doesn't mean you have to agree with them, but it gives you insight into why they appear. This awareness creates space for rewriting your internal story, becoming someone who sees taking care of themselves as an essential, normal part of life rather than an indulgence or a moral failing. The goal is to move towards a mindset that values your well-being without attaching guilt as an unavoidable consequence of self-love. It can be eye-opening to realize that guilt isn't necessarily an indicator that you've done something wrong. Instead, it often signals that you're operating under old, automatic programming, beliefs and habits that were programmed into you long ago and are now running on autopilot. These internal scripts are like remnants of messages once delivered by family, teachers, or society that have been stored away and activated whenever you try to prioritize your health or well-being. Guilt, in this context, is less a moral response and more a learned emotion that has been conditioned over years. Recognizing this can be freeing because it shifts your perspective from feeling guilty as a badge of shame to viewing it as an outdated response rooted in history, not reality. Think of guilt as a reflex that kicks in automatically, much like a knee-jerk reaction in the body. It's not necessarily a valid reflection of your current situation, but a conditioned response based on past messages. For example, if you successfully set boundaries at work, you might feel guilty even if you're doing what's best for your mental health. This guilt can be traced back to messages that said you shouldn't put yourself before others, or that taking breaks was selfish. Over time, these internal responses become so ingrained that they seem normal, but understanding that they are reactions to old programming invites a new, more compassionate approach. Instead of accepting guilt as a sign of failure, you can start observing it with curiosity, acknowledging that it's merely a relic of beliefs you no longer need to carry. Replacing the automatic guilt response involves a gentle process of questioning these feelings, asking yourself whether they are still valid today. Is your current situation genuinely wrong? Or is this guilt feeling like an overreaction based on past experiences? When you notice guilt surfacing, take a moment to breathe and remind yourself that caring for your health is a responsible, necessary act. Recognizing that guilt often reflects old programming rather than current truth empowers you to choose more mindful, supportive responses. Over time, this practice helps rewrite the internal scripts, making room for a healthier, guilt-free relationship with self-care and personal boundaries. The good girl/good guy trap. Many people caught in the good girl/good guy trap are unknowingly caught in a cycle of over-efforting. They believe that by constantly giving more kindness, more sacrifice, more attention, they can secure love and acceptance. Often, this pattern begins early in life, perhaps from messages we absorbed growing up. If you're perfect, if you always help others, or being agreeable keeps you safe. Over time, these beliefs create a relentless drive to please others, seeking approval as if it's a form of currency that validates their worth. This over-efforting becomes automatic, a kind of self-imposed obligation that feels necessary, almost like a conditional part of your identity. You might find yourself saying yes to requests, even when it drains you, because saying no threatens your sense of security. There's a persistent fear that if you stop trying so hard, love will disappear. It's easy to mistake these patterns as genuine kindness or humility when in reality, they mask a deep fear of rejection or worthlessness. Recognizing these habits requires honest reflection, often challenging ingrained beliefs and emotional patterns you may have silently accepted for years. Many individuals who fall into this trap are unaware of how much they internalize external validation. Their self-esteem becomes intertwined with whether they're perceived as helpful, good, or obedient. This can lead to feelings of burnout, frustration, or resentment, as they continually pour energy into relationships that may not reciprocate or appreciate their efforts genuinely. Recognizing these cycles means paying close attention to when you feel compelled to overextend yourself, especially if it's driven more by fear or a need to be loved than genuine desire. Importantly, noticing these habits isn't about blaming yourself. Rather, it's about understanding how these patterns originated and how they have become automatic responses. When you see that over-efforting is a tried-and-true way you've tried to earn love, it opens a window for change. Instead of reacting on autopilot, you can start questioning whether the effort comes from a true place of connection or from a need to be seen as good enough. This awareness allows you to begin breaking free from the cycle, step by step. One of the most common myths that fuels the good girl/good guy cycle is the belief that to be truly lovable, you must be perfect, flawless in your behavior, choices, and appearance. This misconception can be incredibly exhausting, as it sets an impossible standard. Perfection is an illusion. No one can meet that level of always getting everything right or being universally accepted. Yet, many hold on to this idea tightly, thinking that small mistakes or imperfections threaten their worth, fueling a relentless pursuit of flawlessness that drains their energy and happiness. To free yourself from this belief, it's helpful to start by examining where the idea of perfection came from and how it's affecting your life now. Often, societal messages, childhood experiences, or past relationships teach us that we must always be the good girl/good guy to be loved. This can lead to fear of being judged or rejected for showing vulnerability or making mistakes. But in reality, human connection is built on authenticity, imperfections, and shared struggles. Accepting that you are inherently enough, just as you are, shifts your focus from trying to prove your worth to simply being yourself. It's crucial to understand that striving for perfection often leads to feelings of inadequacy and self-criticism when inevitable mistakes happen. These moments create guilt and shame, reinforcing the idea that you are not good enough unless you're perfect, an endless loop. The goal isn't to eliminate mistakes, but to change your relationship with them. Recognize that making errors is part of life and growth. Showing vulnerability, admitting faults, and accepting imperfections are signs of strength, not weakness. This shift can lighten your emotional load and foster more genuine relationships based on acceptance and honesty. Practicing self-compassion helps in this process. When you catch yourself thinking, "I should have done better," gently remind yourself that being human means making mistakes. Celebrate small steps towards self-acceptance, such as setting boundaries, saying no when necessary, or sharing an authentic opinion. These actions reinforce the truth that you are enough without needing to be perfect. Over time, this mindset encourages a kinder inner voice and healthier relationships, rooted in truth rather than unattainable standards. Remember, true connection is born out of being real, showing your authentic self and accepting others as they are. When you let go of the need for perfection, you create space for empathy, compassion, and genuine interaction. Small daily affirmations or gentle reflections on your worth can help cement this change. Know that the journey involves recurring practice, patience, and a willingness to embrace all aspects of yourself, flaws included. That's when the pressure of always performing or being good enough begins to lift, opening a path toward a more peaceful way of relating to yourself and others. Reframing guilt as growth. Many of us tend to see guilt as something negative, something we need to fight against or dismiss quickly. But what if guilt could actually serve as a subtle signal that you're paying attention to your boundaries and needs? When you feel guilty, it often points to a moment where you've said yes when you really wanted to say no, or vice versa. Rather than automatically judging yourself or trying to suppress these feelings, consider viewing guilt as your internal compass reminding you of what truly matters to you in that moment. It's a sign that you're aligning or misaligning with your authentic self, which is always valuable information. For example, if you decline an invitation because you're exhausted but hide your fatigue and agree out of guilt, it indicates a misalignment with your boundary of self-care. When you recognize that guilty feeling, ask yourself, "Am I honoring my need for rest?" That reflection allows you to make choices rooted in respect for yourself, rather than fear of disappointing others. Guilt can help you become more aware of what you truly need and ensure your actions match your values, creating a foundation for healthier relationships with yourself and others. Over time, shifting your perspective can transform guilt from a badge of shame into a helpful guide that keeps you connected to your true self. Understanding guilt as an indicator of your inner boundaries means getting comfortable with sitting with uncomfortable feelings. It's a sign that you're at a crossroads where your actions and your inner voice are in conversation. Instead of reacting defensively or suppressing guilt, take a moment to listen. What is this feeling genuinely telling you? Perhaps it's that you need more rest, more time alone, or the confidence to say no. By embracing guilt as a form of communication, you can develop a deeper awareness of yourself and foster empathy for your own boundaries. This shift helps you see guilt not as a flaw, but as a tool for honoring who you are at your core. Guilt often gets a bad reputation because it's so easy to fall into the trap of punishing ourselves for feeling it. Instead of viewing guilt as a sign of failure or weakness, consider it a helpful signal pointing you toward better choices. The key is to observe guilt without judgment and use it as a compass rather than a whip. When you notice feelings of guilt arising, pause and reflect on what action or thought triggered it. Ask yourself whether the feeling is alerting you to a misstep, or if it's rooted in outdated beliefs, fear of judgment, or a desire to avoid discomfort. For instance, if you feel guilty for taking time off work to focus on your mental health, instead of berating yourself, recognize this guilt as a prompt to reassess what aligns with your well-being. Then, consciously choose to prioritize your health, knowing that it's an act of self-respect, not selfishness. Using guilt as a guide in this way helps you shift away from harsh self-punishment and toward compassionate self-awareness. It's about adopting a mindset where feelings are signals, not enemies, and where each emotion pushes you to practice healthier, more authentic choices. Over time, this approach can transform guilt from a source of shame into a powerful tool for growth and self-acceptance. Practically, when guilt arises, notice the physical sensations, tightness, knots, or discomfort, and take a deep breath. Then, gently question what internal story or expectation is fueling that sensation. Are you holding yourself to unreasonable standards? Are you worried about how others might judge you? Identifying these underlying beliefs gives you the opportunity to reframe the guilt, transforming it into a prompt to realign your actions with your values. By doing this consistently, guilt gradually becomes a supporter rather than a critic, helping you navigate choices with clarity and kind self-awareness. Practice the guilt doesn't mean wrong mantra. Guilt often feels like a heavy weight, pressing down on your chest and whispering that you've fallen short. But in truth, guilt is a sign that you're alive and aware, that you care about how your actions impact others and yourself. Instead of seeing guilt as a wrong or a failure, think of it as a natural signal, a gentle reminder that you're learning and evolving. This awareness shows that you're conscious of your choices, and that's a good thing. When you start viewing guilt through this lens, it becomes less about judgment and more about understanding. Remember, everyone makes mistakes. They're simply part of being human, part of the process of growing into a better version of yourself. Next time guilt sneaks in and begins to feel overwhelming, pause and softly remind yourself that it's okay. In fact, it's expected. You're not wrong for feeling guilt, you're normal. Guilt can be a marker of empathy, of your desire to do better. When you see guilt as a sign of your human effort rather than a flaw, it softens. Instead of beating yourself up for feeling guilty, honor that feeling and recognize it as part of your path. You can think of guilt as a road sign pointing toward growth, an indication that you're paying attention to your inner life and what matters most to you. Accepting guilt in this way makes it easier to hold it softly, without letting it turn into shame or self-criticism. This affirmation, guilt doesn't mean wrong, can become a quiet mantra to anchor you during vulnerable moments. Repeat it gently, allowing it to sink into your consciousness. Say it softly in your mind when guilt starts to swell, and notice how the act of saying it begins to change your perspective. It's not about denying guilt, but about acknowledging it as a normal and even healthy part of your journey. Over time, this reassurance helps you see that mistakes and imperfections are not signs of failure. They are opportunities for learning. Every time you remind yourself that guilt is a sign of growth, you reclaim a piece of your peace and soften the emotional sting of guilt. With patience, this shift creates space for compassion and self-love to grow within you. Chapter 7. How Codependents Attract and Stay with Emotionally Unavailable People. Why chaos feels familiar. Chaos and drama often feel oddly comforting because they tap into our deep desire for connection, even if that connection comes through turbulent circumstances. When we see others reacting intensely, we might interpret that as passion, care, or intimacy. This misinterpretation can lead us to believe that sharing in chaos somehow bonds us more strongly to those around us. The truth is, these patterns repeatedly draw us into cycles where the focus is on surviving the storm rather than truly understanding or nurturing ourselves or others. Over time, this creates a false sense of closeness, making us feel connected because we're always in crisis mode. Yet fundamentally, that connection feels hollow and leaves us more exhausted than fulfilled. This kind of familiarity with chaos is often rooted in childhood experiences or past relationships, where drama became a shortcut to feeling seen or loved. When chaos becomes the language of connection, it teaches us that silence or calm is equated with disconnection or indifference. So, we unconsciously seek out situations where tension brews because it feels familiar, even if it's not truly fulfilling. This creates a loop that keeps us hooked on the drama, telling us that without it, we might be alone or unseen. Recognizing this pattern is the first step toward breaking free from the false connection it provides, opening space for healthier, more authentic relationships built on trust and calm understanding. One of the most impactful steps you can take is learning to notice how these patterns show up in daily life. Often, we are so used to reacting in similar ways that it almost feels automatic. To start noticing, try stepping back for a moment each time you find yourself caught in a cycle of chaos or drama. Whether it's raising your voice, overreacting to small issues, or engaging in unproductive conflict. Ask yourself, what pattern am I repeating here? Are there common triggers or themes that keep surfacing? Most importantly, do these reactions lead to resolution or simply prolong the tension? When you pause and observe these reactions without judging yourself, you begin to see the familiar rhythm that keeps you stuck. This awareness builds a kind of emotional clarity that allows you to catch the pattern before it pulls you in further. For example, if you notice that every time a certain person criticizes you, you respond defensively or retaliate, that's a cue you're caught in a loop. By recognizing these moments early, you can choose to respond differently, perhaps with curiosity instead of defensiveness, or simply by stepping away to gather your thoughts. Over time, this practice helps untangle the old habits from your present choices. It's like breaking a chain that kept pulling you into the same stressful situations over and over. The key is patience and gentle curiosity, knowing that it's natural to fall back into old ways, but that every moment of awareness provides an opportunity to choose differently. Practicing this kind of reflection, perhaps by journaling or taking a few deep breaths before reacting, allows you to slow down in the midst of intense emotions. Small acts of pause and self-inquiry teach you that you possess the power to interrupt these cycles. Instead of being swept away by familiar chaos, you learn to see it for what it is, a pattern, not a necessity. This shift opens up room for new responses and new ways of relating to yourself and others, gradually shifting your experience from chaos-driven connections to genuine, peaceful bonds. Avoidance and codependence, the toxic magnet. At the heart of many challenging relationships lies a magnetic pull between two very different ways of connecting. One partner tends to be emotionally distant or unavailable, while the other overextends themselves in effort to create closeness. The avoidant partner often shields their feelings, retreating when intimacy feels overwhelming or demanding. Meanwhile, the overgiving partner tries tirelessly to bridge the emotional gap, offering support, validation, and care, even when it's not reciprocated. This dynamic feels like an invisible tug-of-war, where neither side quite feels fully seen or understood, yet both feel compelled to keep trying. The avoidance need for space and emotional independence clashes with the dependent's desire for reassurance and closeness, creating a pattern too familiar for many to recognize but hard to break. One reason this pull is so persistent is that both partners are doing what they believe will protect them, even if it keeps them stuck in a cycle of frustration. The avoidant partner might suppress their feelings out of fear of losing autonomy or feeling trapped, viewing closeness as a threat to their sense of safety. The overgiver, on the other hand, often feels a deep sense of responsibility to fulfill their partner's needs, almost as if their worth hinges on their capacity to care and sustain the relationship. In their desire to feel loved and accepted, they push themselves beyond their limits, convinced that if they try hard enough, they can soften the other's walls. This creates a push and pull where both attempt to get their needs met, but inadvertently reinforce the very behaviors that keep them apart. This cycle becomes familiar over time, with interactions often feeling predictable in their patterns. The avoidant partner withdraws or remains emotionally distant, leading the overgiver to chase, ask for reassurance, or try to fix the situation through extra effort. Meanwhile, the avoidant might inwardly feel guilty or confused about their distancing, but their instincts tell them to protect their space. The overgiver, seeking connection, may interpret the distancing as rejection or failure, which fuels their desire to give more. It's a pattern rooted in unmet needs, each partner always trying to meet their own needs in ways that clash with what the other actually requires, creating an emotional standstill that can feel impossible to resolve. Recognizing how this pattern sustains itself is a crucial step toward change. The avoidance tendency to shut down creates a void, leaving the overgiving partner feeling anxious and desperate for closeness. Their efforts to connect can turn into overattachments. They might smother or overwhelm the avoidant, unintentionally pushing them further away. This, in turn, triggers the avoidant to retreat even more deeply, reinforcing their belief that closeness is risky or suffocating. Both partners become caught in a cycle where their actions inadvertently validate each other's fears, making real connection feel increasingly out of reach. In this dance, longing is constant, neither fully satisfied nor free from the ache of separation. The avoidant longs for independence and emotional safety, yet still experiences moments of yearning for connection, which are quickly dismissed or ignored. The overgiving partner longs for validation, intimacy, and reassurance, often feeling that they're only truly valued when they prove their devotion. These unspoken needs pile up, creating an emotional weight that neither knows how to release. Instead of addressing what's underneath these patterns, both tend to live in a sort of emotional limbo, waiting for the other to change, hoping that someday the distance will close or the giving will be enough to fill their emptiness. That longing is what keeps the cycle spinning, each partner seeking the other's approval or acknowledgement without knowing quite how to give it in a healthy way. This craving for closeness is deeply human, yet the way it plays out between avoidance and overgivers often feels like a paradox, wanting connection desperately but also pushing it away. The avoidant resists emotional vulnerability because it feels unsafe, while the overgiving partner hopes that persistence and care will eventually mend the distance. But without awareness and conscious effort, this pattern becomes self-perpetuating. Both partners live with a sense of unsatisfied yearning, one side feeling neglected, the other feeling overwhelmed, and neither feeling truly seen or understood. As long as these underlying needs remain unarticulated, the cycle continues, trapping them in a loop of longing and disappointment. To start breaking free from this pattern, it's helpful to recognize how your own actions and beliefs contribute to it. For the overgiver, it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that your love and effort are enough to heal the emotional distance. But real connection happens when both partners are willing to show vulnerability and share their authentic feelings, not just actions or sacrifices. On the other hand, the avoidant might need to examine whether their retreat is based on fears rather than actual threats, and consider how their distance affects their partner's sense of safety and worth. Understanding that both approaches are driven by core needs, safety for the avoidant, connection for the overgiver, can open the door to more compassion and intentional change. Practically, notice your own patterns. Are you constantly trying to fix things through giving? Do you feel anxious or desperate when your partner pulls away? Conversely, do you withdraw without explanation or shut down when things get uncomfortable? Recognizing these tendencies is the first step in shifting the cycle. Sometimes, simply pausing to ask yourself what you truly need right now, whether it's space to breathe or reassurance to feel loved, can change the way you respond to your partner's actions. Moving toward healthier communication and boundaries can gradually untangle the emotional web that keeps both partners stuck in longing and frustration. Remember, small shifts in awareness and behavior can eventually lead to a more balanced, compassionate connection, one rooted in mutual understanding rather than endless chasing or retreating. The hope trap. If I'm just good enough, they'll open up. Many of us grow up believing that if we just try hard enough, be good enough, or fix ourselves enough, love and acceptance will follow. This idea often shows up in our relationships as the hope that by becoming perfect, whether emotionally, morally, or behaviorally, our partners or loved ones will finally open their hearts to us. It's a quiet, persistent belief that conditional love is just a badge of effort, waiting for us to earn it through flawless effort. But in reality, this is a trap built on illusion. Love based on perfection isn't real. It's a version of love that's designed to keep us chasing, never quite reaching enough to feel safe or truly seen. When we place our worth on meeting these impossible standards, we inadvertently set ourselves up for disappointment. We start to believe that when we are just right, then things will change. It may look like trying to fix our flaws, suppress our needs, or present a perfect version of ourselves. We convince ourselves that if we can just prove our worthiness, the barriers holding love away will fall. But all this effort often leads to exhaustion, frustration, and a growing sense that we're trapped in a cycle where no amount of trying seems to make love grow more genuine or stable. Recognizing this pattern is the first step toward freeing ourselves from the illusion that perfection can buy acceptance or intimacy. It's helpful to reflect on how this belief influences your relationships. Do you find yourself constantly trying to be better, cleaner, kinder, or more accommodating in hopes that this will encourage others to love you? Are you holding back parts of yourself, fearing that expressing your true feelings or vulnerabilities will scare someone away? The truth is that real connection happens when we accept ourselves as we are, not when we pretend to be someone else, hoping others will see us as worthy. The idea of earning love through perfection keeps us distant from the authentic self that actually draws genuine intimacy. It's a mirage, promising warmth, but delivering only more loneliness and longing for approval. Letting go of the hope that conditional love can change someone is a process rooted in acceptance and understanding. Many of us cling to the idea that if we somehow become enough, more patient, forgiving, understanding, or compliant, our loved ones will change their ways or open up. We grip tightly to this hope because deep down, it feels better than facing the painful truth. You cannot force someone to love you or change how they behave by trying harder. True change, if it happens, comes from within, not from our effort to manipulate or fix others. Releasing that hope requires a gentle but firm shift in perspective. It involves recognizing that love is not a transaction or a prize to be earned, but a choice made freely by both people. When we accept someone as they are, with all their flaws and limitations, we create space for authentic connection. Over time, this acceptance also frees us from the constant cycle of disappointment, because we stop relying on conditional outcomes to validate our worth. Instead, we focus on what is within our control, our own feelings, boundaries, and needs. Knowing that in letting go of control over others' change, we open ourselves to genuine growth and peace. Learning to release this hope can be challenging. It often involves grieving the idea that our love or patience alone can transform someone. It might mean setting boundaries around what we tolerate, recognizing when our efforts are fueled by trying to rewrite someone's core patterns, rather than caring for ourselves. A practical step is to notice when you're holding on to the hope that love will change a situation. Ask yourself, am I trying to fix or change this person, or am I accepting who they are right now? Making this distinction allows you to release some of the weight of expectation. Over time, this shift nurtures a healthier perspective, one rooted in acceptance, not obligation, giving you greater clarity and emotional freedom. In focusing on your own well-being, rather than attempting to manipulate others' responses, you create an environment where authentic relationships can develop. Remember, genuine love isn't about fixing or controlling. It's about mutual respect, acceptance, and willingness to be seen for who we truly are. Starting with this mindset can gradually strengthen your capacity to release the hope of conditional love, leading to more honest, nurturing connections both with yourself and others. Practice noticing emotional breadcrumbs. Recognizing emotional availability can feel like tuning into a faint, often overlooked signal that others send with their words, gestures, and even their silence. These subtle signals act as breadcrumbs, revealing how open or closed someone truly is to connection. For example, when someone consistently avoids eye contact, seems distracted during conversations, or gives short, clipped responses, it may indicate they are not emotionally present or ready to engage deeply. Sometimes, it's in the small moments, like how someone responds when asked how they're feeling or whether they're available for meaningful talks, that their true emotional state shows itself. These nuances aren't always obvious, but with attention, you can begin to notice patterns that hint at their emotional openness or retreat. Paying close attention to consistency matters because one-off behaviors might be nothing more than a bad day, but repeated patterns often reveal underlying truths. Standing back and observing these signals without rushing to interpret them is key. It helps avoid jumping to conclusions based on fleeting feelings or hopes. Instead, try to see these signals as a form of emotional honesty that, when noticed over time, can build a clearer picture of someone's capacity for vulnerability. Remember, everyone has moments where they shut down or withdraw temporarily. It's part of being human. But if you find that someone's signals consistently communicate detachment or discomfort, it's worth considering their true emotional state. This isn't about labeling or judging, but simply about becoming more aware of what someone's behavior might be indicating beneath surface appearances. The goal is to develop a gentle habit of noticing without overreacting, creating space to understand whether their signals point toward genuine openness or emotional barriers. Sometimes, these cues are quite subtle, like a slight pause before answering, avoiding topics that seem personal, or a reluctance to make commitments. Other times, they show through body language such as closed-off postures, crossed arms, or avoiding physical closeness. Recognizing these signs requires patience and a willingness to suspend immediate judgment. Think about it like learning a new language. At first, it might sound confusing, but over time, you pick up the patterns that carry meaning. By consciously observing and tuning into these small signals, you can develop a better sense of whether someone is emotionally available for a genuine connection or keeping their walls firmly in place. This awareness sets the foundation for honest interactions, built on understanding rather than assumption or wishful thinking. When we really want someone to be emotionally available, it's natural to cling to hopeful ideas that maybe, just maybe, they will open up eventually. But holding on to these hopes can sometimes cloud our judgment and lead us to ignore crucial warning signs. Instead, Cultivating patience means allowing space for natural processes to unfold without forcing or rushing others to reveal more than they're ready to share. It involves accepting that some people move at different speeds in their emotional journeys, and that true connection can't be hurried. Encouraging honesty, both within ourselves and in relationships, means trusting that genuine openness is worth waiting for, rather than settling for surface-level interactions that only leave us feeling more disconnected. When you approach relationships with patience and a commitment to honesty, you're less likely to distort signals or become attached to false hopes that mask underlying delays or barriers. This approach requires a gentle firmness, recognizing when it's appropriate to give space and when it's necessary to seek clarity. For example, if someone consistently avoids talking about their feelings or seems uncomfortable during deep conversations, honoring their boundaries is respectful, but it also provides you with clarity about their emotional state. Patience doesn't mean accepting toxicity or dismissing your own needs. It's about avoiding premature assumptions that someone is ready when they are not. Similarly, honesty means being open with your own feelings and intentions, which encourages others to be genuine in return. Over time, this creates a foundation rooted in mutual respect and realism, making authentic connection possible rather than simply chasing an ideal that may not align with reality. Practically, this means refraining from pushing for answers too soon or trying to decode every gesture. Instead, focus on creating opportunities for honest dialogue and observe responses over days or weeks. Numbers or quick fixes don't replace the value of patient observation and gentle, truthful conversations. Recognize that sometimes the most meaningful progress comes from acceptance and willingness to wait until both parties are truly ready to engage openly. If you find yourself clinging to illusions, pause and ask yourself what you're hoping to gain. Then decide if this desire aligns with your well-being. Though patience can feel uncomfortable at times, it ultimately allows space for real emotional growth and honesty to emerge naturally, laying the groundwork for healthier, more authentic relationships. Chapter 8. Coming Home to Yourself. Reconnecting with your own needs, preferences, and voice. Finding the courage to prioritize what matters to you often requires a shift in how we see ourselves and our responsibilities. Society frequently praises self-sacrifice and making sure others are cared for, but it rarely emphasizes the importance of caring for oneself first. This can lead to feelings of guilt whenever we think of putting our needs ahead of others, especially in a culture that values selflessness over self-care. Yet, making space to honor your preferences is not selfish. It's a necessary act of self-respect. Courage begins with small steps, like choosing activities that bring you peace or saying no to things that drain your energy without feeling guilty. As you start to trust your inner voice, you gradually see that taking care of yourself isn't a sign of weakness, but a foundation for better relationships and a more balanced life. It's about daring to be honest with yourself, acknowledging your limits, passions, and boundaries, and having confidence that your well-being benefits everyone around you. Over time, prioritizing what genuinely matters becomes a natural choice rather than a brave exception. Building this courage often involves confronting fears rooted in judgment or rejection. Many people worry that saying no or choosing their own path might upset loved ones or make them seem selfish. Yet, the more you practice asserting your needs, the more you realize that yes to yourself doesn't mean no to others. It simply means you are choosing authenticity over fear. Reflecting on what holds you back can reveal underlying beliefs, such as feeling undeserving or fearing judgment, that need gentle questioning. One helpful process is to identify specific moments when you felt guilt or hesitation and explore what thoughts were fueling those feelings. After that, you can practice reframing those narratives, reminding yourself that your needs are valid and deserving of attention. For instance, if you're hesitant to express your wishes, take small risks, perhaps sharing your opinions more openly or carving out time for your interests, and notice how it feels. Each step builds confidence, making it easier to prioritize what truly matters without carrying unnecessary guilt. If you allow yourself to listen quietly and act with compassion, you're planting seeds for a deeper sense of self-trust and inner strength. Building self-trust again. Building trust in yourself often begins with the small, everyday choices you make. When you commit to something, even a minor promise or intention, following through helps reinforce a sense of integrity. For example, if you tell yourself you're going to go for a walk, do it. If you decide to pause before reacting to someone's comment, honor that decision. These small acts are like the stepping stones that gradually rebuild your internal belief that you can count on yourself. Each time you stick to your word or honor your feelings, you create a pattern of reliability that seeps into other areas of life. Often, the challenge is not in big, dramatic promises, but in the consistency of everyday decisions. When you start paying attention to your commitments, no matter how insignificant they seem, you send a message to yourself that your feelings and needs matter. For instance, if you decide to set boundaries about your time or express your true opinion instead of staying silent, you're practicing self-respect. These moments might feel small, but over time, they build a foundation of trust that becomes stronger with each act of honesty and follow-through. The key is persistence. Every day, choose to honor your word and feelings, even if it feels uncomfortable at first. It's also helpful to reflect on and celebrate these small victories. When you uphold your commitments, pause for a moment to recognize what that means. Acknowledge your effort and how it reinforces your sense of safety and reliability within yourself. Remember, even setbacks are chances to learn. If you slip and don't follow through, gently acknowledge it without judgment and decide how to proceed differently next time. This gentle approach fosters patience and compassion towards yourself, making the process of rebuilding trust feel less like a chore and more like a nurturing practice. Consistency is what transforms these small acts into a meaningful shift. Over time, you'll notice yourself feeling more confident in decisions, trusting your instincts, and knowing deep down that your feelings are valid. This doesn't require perfection, only a sincere commitment to keep trying, learning, and showing up for yourself, regardless of the outcomes. That steady effort creates a sense of reliability that no one can take away, because it's rooted in your own ongoing experience of honoring what's true for you. When you think about the relationships in your life, whether with friends, family, or partners, the quality of those bonds often depends on how much you trust yourself. If you find that trusting others feels difficult or unreliable, it's usually because there's a gap in your own self-trust. When you don't feel confident in your own judgment or feelings, it's hard to believe others will respect or understand you. Conversely, establishing that inner trust acts as a solid base for healthy, authentic connections. It's like knowing you're anchored, no matter what external winds blow your way. Trust in yourself shapes the way you communicate and set boundaries. When you truly believe your feelings are valid and that your voice matters, you become more willing to speak openly and honestly. This honesty fosters deeper intimacy because others sense your authenticity. On the other hand, if your self-trust is shaky, you might second-guess yourself, hide parts of who you are, or settle for less than you deserve in relationships. Recognizing your capacity to trust yourself helps you discern who genuinely supports your growth and who might not, making it easier to establish healthy boundaries and be selective about your emotional investments. Furthermore, self-trust cushions you against manipulation or betrayal. When you believe in your ability to recognize what aligns with your values, you're less likely to stay in damaging situations out of fear or uncertainty. Instead, you'll feel empowered to walk away or speak up, knowing that your feelings are legitimate guides. As you strengthen your self-trust, you naturally attract relationships that respect and nurture your emotional well-being. These connections are rooted in mutual understanding and honesty, creating a cycle of trust that feels safe and supportive for everyone involved. Ultimately, the ripple effect of trusting yourself extends beyond intimate relationships. It impacts your work, friendships, and even how you approach challenges. When self-trust is present, decision-making becomes clearer and more aligned with your true self. This clarity allows you to act with confidence, which in turn reinforces your internal sense of reliability. The process is gradual, but with each step of honoring your feelings and needs, you build a resilient inner core. Recognizing this connection is freeing because it means that your ability to trust yourself can shape every aspect of your life for the better, creating a foundation that no external circumstances can shake. Remember, cultivating this trust is not about becoming perfect. It's about consistently coming back to yourself with honesty and kindness. Each time you choose to honor your feelings or stand by your word, you add a brick to that sturdy foundation. Over time, this foundation becomes strong enough to support healthier relationships, more genuine connections, and a deeper sense of inner peace. Trusting yourself isn't an overnight achievement. It's a gentle, ongoing process that rewards patience and gentle persistence. Spending time alone without feeling abandoned. Finding time to be alone can feel uncomfortable at first, especially if your mind is used to constant activity or if loneliness has been associated with negative feelings. To start, think of your alone time as a gift rather than a punishment. Creating a space where you feel secure and comfortable can make a significant difference. This might mean setting up a cozy corner in your home with your favorite blanket, soft lighting, or calming objects that bring you peace. It's important to feel that this space is yours, a sanctuary where you can relax without interruptions or judgment. When you intentionally carve out this area, you begin to associate it with calm, safety, and self-care rather than abandonment or loneliness. Over time, your inner world can expand in this safe space, helping you develop a deeper connection with your thoughts, feelings, and inner voice. Remember, solitude isn't about escaping from others, but about reconnecting with yourself in a nurturing way. When you prioritize creating a safe environment for solitude, you may also want to establish gentle routines that gradually ease you into alone time. For some, this might mean starting with just 5 or 10 minutes of silence each day, gradually increasing as you become more comfortable. Incorporate calming activities that make you feel grounded, such as listening to soft music, journaling your thoughts, or practicing mindfulness. Surprisingly, the simple act of breathing deeply and paying attention to your breath can anchor you in the present moment, reducing feelings of anxiety. As you experiment with these practices, remind yourself that feeling uneasy initially is normal, that those emotions are part of the process of learning to be comfortable with your own company. Cultivating patience with yourself creates an environment where you can slowly build trust in your capacity to enjoy your own presence. Developing a space of safety also involves changing the way you talk to yourself about solitude. Instead of viewing alone time as a sign of loneliness or abandonment, try to reframe it as an opportunity for growth and self-discovery. Think of solitude as a period where you can listen to your inner voice without external distractions. For example, rather than avoiding silence, gradually sit with it, noticing what thoughts or feelings arise. In doing so, you learn to accept whatever comes up without judgment or resistance. Over time, this acceptance becomes a foundation for emotional resilience. Your inner world becomes a place where you feel more equipped to manage difficult feelings, reducing the tendency to seek constant external validation. Remember, creating a safe space for solitude is a process, one that encourages compassion and curiosity toward yourself. Many people carry fears about being alone, often rooted in worries of abandonment, insignificance, or failure to find joy outside of others' company. Recognizing and understanding these fears is crucial when learning to spend time alone peacefully. Sometimes, these worries stem from past experiences, perhaps a childhood where being alone meant being ignored or unloved. Other times, societal messages emphasize companionship as a sign of success or happiness, reinforcing the idea that solitude is something to fear. Facing these fears involves gently exploring them, questioning their validity, and acknowledging their presence without judgment. Ask yourself what feelings or thoughts come up when you think about being alone. Often, just bringing awareness to these fears diminishes their power and opens the door to understanding that they are just stories we tell ourselves. Discovering self-sufficiency begins with small steps. Notice how you respond when you face moments of solitude. Do you reach out for distractions, or can you sit with the silence? Recognize that being alone offers fertile ground for cultivating your independence. It's an opportunity to learn what truly satisfies you, outside of external approval or social validation. For example, you might find new hobbies or interests that you enjoy doing alone, reading, drawing, gardening, or simply taking long walks. These activities can serve as a foundation for developing a sense of purpose and confidence within yourself. Over time, you will start to notice that your happiness isn't entirely dependent on others, but rather rooted in your own inner resources. This discovery nurtures resilience, helping you realize that you possess the strength to face any moment without needing constant reassurance from outside sources. Building self-sufficiency also involves embracing your vulnerabilities, that it's okay to feel uncertain or uncomfortable at times. Instead of avoiding these feelings, practice welcoming them as signals that you are growing. For instance, when loneliness or fear arises, take a moment to breathe and observe what's happening within. Ask yourself what part of you might need reassurance or understanding. This process creates a kind of inner dialogue where you become your own supportive presence. As this relationship with yourself deepens, the need for external validation diminishes. You begin to see yourself as capable and complete, even when alone, which in turn strengthens your ability to stand on your own, emotionally and mentally. Realizing your self-sufficiency isn't about being perfect or always okay, but about trusting that you can handle whatever comes your way with kindness and patience. Practice the "What do I want today?" ritual. Starting each day with a gentle check-in can feel like giving yourself a moment of quiet understanding. It's about pausing, even if just for a few moments, to ask yourself what truly feels right at that moment. Often, we go through our routines on autopilot, following external schedules or obligations without really checking in with our inner selves. This simple act becomes a kind of anchor, an opportunity to reconnect with what you need, want, or simply feel drawn toward in that particular day. It doesn't have to be elaborate or complicated, just a sincere question posed with kindness and curiosity. Over time, this practice helps build a habit of tuning into your inner landscape, making you more aware of your genuine preferences rather than just reacting out of habit or external pressure. This daily ritual encourages you to listen without judgment, creating space for your inner voice to be heard clearly. Our desires and needs can often get buried beneath the noise of daily life, work demands, other people's expectations, or even our internal worries. By pausing to ask, "What do I want today?" you're giving yourself permission to slow down and honor your feelings, no matter how small or fleeting they might seem. This might translate to choosing a different breakfast than usual, deciding to take a walk instead of sitting in front of screens, or simply acknowledging that you are feeling tired and need rest. Over time, this habit nurtures self-awareness, making it easier to recognize patterns or preferences you may have overlooked. It's a gentle reminder that no matter how busy life gets, you're still capable of tuning in and honoring your needs each day. Building awareness of your inner voice as a reliable guide is an empowering step toward greater self-control and emotional balance. Many people think of their inner voice as a mysterious or distant part of themselves, but in reality, it's often quieter than the noise of everyday life. Learning to recognize what this voice sounds like among the chatter can take some patience. It might manifest as a soft nudge, a feeling in your gut, or a gentle thought that pops up when you pause long enough to listen. The more you practice, the clearer this voice becomes, acting like a steady compass pointing you toward what matters most at that moment. This process involves tuning into physical sensations, emotional signals, and intuitive impressions, paying attention to what genuinely sparks joy or discomfort inside you. Over time, these cues help you make choices aligned with your true self instead of defaulting to external pressures. Imagine a typical morning where you've dismissed your own preferences in favor of getting everything done quickly. Maybe you've skipped breakfast because there's no time, or you mindlessly scroll your phone, ignoring inner feelings. Now try placing one hand on your chest or belly for a moment and asking, "What do I want today?" Notice any hints that come up. Perhaps you realize you're craving a moment of quiet or a brief stretch. Perhaps your body signals fatigue or excitement. Giving space for these signals to surface creates a dialogue between your conscious mind and your intuitive awareness. This ongoing practice nurtures trust, making it easier to make decisions that respect your well-being. It's about turning daily routines into rituals of self-awareness and care, rather than mindless chores. Sometimes, the most important thing you can do is simply acknowledge your current feelings without judgment. If you realize you're feeling overwhelmed or irritable, asking yourself, "What do I want today?" could reveal a need for rest, connection, or even just a few moments of breath. Recognizing these needs in real time helps you avoid ignoring or suppressing emotions that might otherwise cause long-term stress or tension. It's a small act of kindness toward yourself, which over days and weeks can shift your perception from one of constant busyness to one of gentle attentiveness. Remember, this isn't about making huge changes every day, but about cultivating a steady habit of listening and responding from a place of honesty and compassion. This daily check-in becomes a quiet act of self-love, reinforcing that your needs are legitimate and worthy of attention every single day. As you continue this practice, you might find it helpful to keep a small journal nearby. Jot down the insights or feelings that surface each morning. Over time, patterns may emerge, certain desires that recur or feelings that stay with you longer. Recognizing these patterns guides you toward understanding your deeper preferences and inclinations. For instance, you might notice that on days when you prioritize your own preferences, you feel more balanced and content. Conversely, ignoring this ritual might lead to days filled with resistance or frustration. This simple reaffirmation of your needs can empower you to set gentle boundaries, choose activities that nourish you, and ultimately foster a more authentic connection with yourself. It becomes a quiet anchor in the chaotic waves of daily life, reminding you that your inner voice, however soft, holds valuable wisdom that can shape how you experience each day. Chapter 9. Healing isn't going cold. It's getting clear. You don't have to become a stone wall. Many of us have been taught that keeping our walls up and appearing unaffected is a way to protect ourselves from pain. However, true emotional healing is quite the opposite. It involves learning to remain tender and open, even when past wounds threaten to make us guarded. Being soft doesn't mean being fragile or vulnerable to every hurt that comes along. It means allowing ourselves to feel, to process emotions, and to accept our human need for connection and understanding. When we try to harden ourselves, we often end up shutting out the very things that help us heal: empathy, compassion, and vulnerability. Instead of viewing softness as weakness, recognize it as a strength, an act of courage that requires us to be honest with ourselves and others about our feelings. Sometimes, holding on to rigidity feels like a defense mechanism. We tell ourselves that if we don't show emotion, we won't get hurt. Yet, suppressing feelings often leads to emotional buildup, which can become overwhelming and even physically draining. Healing means accepting that emotions are part of life, and that allowing ourselves to feel deeply is a natural part of growth. Imagine feeling anger, sadness, or fear without shame or guilt. This kind of emotional honesty offers the greatest chance for release and recovery because it bypasses the resistance that keeps pain bottled up. When we stay soft, we build resilience from a place of truth, recognizing that vulnerability is a part of being fully human. Being gentle with ourselves means acknowledging that healing isn't a linear process. Sometimes it's about giving ourselves permission to not be okay for a while, to sit with uncomfortable feelings, and to trust that they will pass. We often fear showing vulnerability because we worry about judgment or rejection, but practicing softness refutes those fears. It's about creating a safe internal space where emotions can be expressed without shame, allowing us to gradually rebuild our sense of trust within ourselves. Healing is messy and nonlinear, and the more we embrace our softness, the more authentic and complete our recovery becomes. Instead of striving for emotional control, try viewing your emotional landscape as part of a larger journey of learning and self-compassion. Having boundaries doesn't mean shutting others out or turning into a stone wall. Instead, boundaries are tools we use to protect our emotional well-being while maintaining healthy relationships. Vulnerability, on the other hand, is about opening our hearts enough to be authentic and real with others. Striking a balance between the two is essential for true connection. When we set boundaries with kindness and clarity, we prevent ourselves from becoming overwhelmed or hurt. This might mean being honest about what triggers us or choosing not to participate in situations that drain our energy. At the same time, allowing ourselves to be vulnerable within those boundaries invites deeper understanding and intimacy. Sharing feelings that are safe and manageable creates trust and strengthens bonds, especially when we do so with compassion for ourselves and others. It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that vulnerability entails complete openness without boundaries, which can lead to feeling exposed and vulnerable to harm. Instead, view vulnerability as a conscious act, one that's paired with self-awareness and self-care. For instance, sharing your feelings about a tough day with a trusted friend while withholding details that might leave you feeling unsafe is a way to stay genuine without overexposing yourself. Compassion plays a vital role in this process. When we approach ourselves with patience and understanding, we're more likely to extend that same kindness to others. Acts of kindness and empathy, even in small moments, can make a significant difference in how we navigate the delicate balance between openness and self-protection. Over time, this approach fosters trust, allowing us to build connections based on honesty and respect without sacrificing our emotional safety. Practicing this balancing act involves recognizing our limits and honoring them. We learn to say no when necessary, without guilt, and to communicate our needs clearly. Building this self-awareness takes time and patience, but it's a skill that pays off through healthier relationships and a more grounded sense of self. Remember that maintaining boundaries is not about creating walls, but about creating a framework within which vulnerability can thrive safely. As you do this, it's crucial to remember that being gentle with yourself increases your capacity to give and receive compassion authentically. When your boundaries are rooted in self-respect, your vulnerability becomes an act of empowerment, opening the door to genuine connection without sacrificing your well-being. Small steps, taken consistently with kindness, can help you strike this delicate balance in a way that feels right for you. Staying soft and self-honoring. Gentle assertiveness is essentially about finding the balance between standing up for yourself and honoring your feelings, without crossing into defensiveness or shutting others out. It's about communicating your needs honestly, while still maintaining a tender, open attitude. Instead of aggressive demands or passive silence, gentle assertiveness involves expressing yourself clearly and kindly. This approach allows you to set boundaries and voice concerns without creating walls that block connection with others. To practice this kind of assertiveness, start by tuning into what you genuinely feel and need in each situation. It's easy to get caught up in trying to please everyone or avoid conflict, but learning to check in with yourself creates a foundation for honest communication. When you notice tension rising inside, pause and take a breath. This pause helps prevent reactive impulses from taking over, giving you space to choose words and actions that resonate with your true self. For example, instead of saying, "You always ignore me," you might say, "I feel unheard when I don't get a response, and I'd appreciate more connection." This wording invites understanding without blame. Remember that gentle assertiveness is a skill that grows with practice. It's not about perfection, but rather about consistently bringing awareness to how you communicate. Prioritizing kindness in your tone and words can transform even challenging exchanges. Practice with small, everyday situations, refusing an invitation that doesn't feel right, expressing your preferences, or setting a boundary with someone close. Each small step builds confidence in your ability to express yourself authentically while remaining compassionate, which maintains the connection to your heart and theirs. Understanding that kindness is a form of strength shifts the way we see both ourselves and how we relate to others. Often, we equate strength with toughness or being unyielding, but true resilience comes from the ability to be gentle, especially when it's difficult. Showing kindness to yourself means forgiving mistakes, honoring your feelings, and giving yourself permission to rest without guilt. When you treat yourself with compassion, you strengthen your inner calm and build a healthier relationship with your emotional world. Extending kindness to others involves listening deeply, offering genuine empathy, and respecting their journey, even when it differs from yours. Kindness does not mean unconditional approval, but rather responding with understanding rather than judgment. It's about recognizing that everyone has their own struggles and insecurities, including you. For example, if someone snaps at you out of frustration, acknowledging their pain rather than reacting defensively preserves your sense of warmth and safety. This openness creates space for more authentic connections, where both parties feel seen and valued. When kindness becomes your guiding principle, it's easier to navigate difficult moments without losing your sense of self or shutting down your heart. It allows you to stay grounded amid emotional storms and respond with patience rather than reacting impulsively. Think of kindness as the sturdy handrail in a storm. It offers security and steadiness, helping you stay aligned with your core values. Over time, practicing this gentle strength encourages a gentle approach to healing wounds, both your own and those of others, fostering deeper self-respect and genuine compassion that nourishes your emotional well-being. How to stay emotionally available without being self-erasing. Creating boundaries is often about finding that delicate balance between protecting yourself and staying receptive to others. Many of us have a tendency to either become too permeable, giving away our energy in ways that leave us drained, or to become closed off, which can hinder genuine connection. To develop boundaries that serve this purpose, start by tuning into your own needs and noticing when you feel overwhelmed or exhausted in interactions. Recognize that setting limits doesn't mean you are rejecting others. It's about honoring your own emotional space so you can genuinely show up. For example, if you notice that certain conversations drain you, give yourself permission to pause or steer the dialogue toward a topic that feels safer and more manageable. This is not about building walls, but about creating a sanctuary within yourself where your energy remains intact, allowing you to stay present and authentic in your connections. Boundaries also include understanding what you are comfortable sharing and where you need to draw lines. This could mean deciding how much time you're willing to spend in emotionally intense situations, or knowing your limits when it comes to discussing personal topics. Saying no when something feels too much for you is a form of self-respect. It might feel uncomfortable at first, especially if you're used to prioritizing others' needs over your own, but remembering that your emotional health matters can shift your perspective. Establishing these boundaries involves ongoing self-awareness, and it's perfectly okay to revisit and adjust them as you grow. For instance, you might find that a certain relationship is overly draining, prompting you to redefine your involvement gradually, rather than cutting someone off abruptly. Ultimately, healthy boundaries serve as guardrails that keep your energy protected without shutting yourself away from life's meaningful exchanges. Remaining open while protecting your energy also means cultivating a mindset of gentle honesty about what you can give. It's about being transparent with others about your limits without guilt and trusting yourself to communicate your needs clearly. Practice saying things like, "I need a bit of time to process this," or "I'm not comfortable discussing that right now," with kindness. Remember, boundaries are not about creating barriers to love. They're about creating space within yourself so that your connection with others remains sustainable. This process requires patience and kindness toward yourself, especially when you fear disappointing others. Over time, you'll develop a sense of safety in your boundaries, which naturally allows you to stay emotionally available without feeling like you're losing yourself in the process. Many of us tend to think of self-care as a luxury or something to do when we're feeling overwhelmed. But in reality, caring for ourselves is the foundation of being truly available to others. When you neglect your emotional, physical, or mental health, it becomes harder to be present and compassionate in your relationships. Self-care isn't just about bubble baths or taking time off. It's about creating daily habits that nourish your well-being. Things like regular sleep, nourishing food, meaningful movement, or peaceful moments to reflect. When you prioritize these fundamental needs, you build resilience and emotional strength that keeps you grounded. Consider how you might shift your routines to include small acts of kindness toward yourself, like setting aside time for your favorite hobby or simply pausing to breathe deeply during a hectic day. Recognizing that your well-being directly impacts your capacity for connection can shift how you see your self-care practices. They are an investment in your ability to relate genuinely and fully to others. Intentionally nurturing yourself also involves setting aside time for emotional processing. This could mean journaling, talking with a trusted friend, or engaging in practices like meditation that promote inner clarity. When you tune into your feelings and respect what they tell you, you're less likely to push down or ignore emotional signals that indicate stress or fatigue. This awareness allows you to respond more thoughtfully to others rather than reacting out of exhaustion or overwhelm. For example, if you notice yourself feeling irritable after a long day, acknowledging it without judgment helps you decide whether to take some rest or reach out for support. By making self-care a regular priority, you create a more resilient core that can handle the ups and downs of relationships, making it easier to stay emotionally available without sacrificing your own needs. True self-care also means learning to recognize when you're giving too much and gently pulling back before burnout occurs. It's okay to step away and recenter when you feel your energy waning. This might look like taking a quiet walk or engaging in a calming activity that restores your inner balance. When you treat yourself with patience and kindness in these moments, you strengthen your ability to be present for others in a more authentic and less strained way. The key is to view self-care not as a separate or selfish act, but as a crucial component of healthy, sustainable relationships, supporting your ability to stay emotionally open while honoring your boundaries and inner needs. When you incorporate consistent, mindful self-care into your life, you build a stable foundation that keeps your heart open and resilient, ready to connect without losing yourself in the process. Story: the relationship that ended, but I didn't break. Ending a relationship with honesty and respect doesn't always mean it's easy, but it often ensures that both people feel seen and valued, at least in their own way. I remember my own experience, sitting across from someone I cared about deeply, knowing that staying silent or avoiding the truth would only hurt us both more in the long run. When I made the choice to speak openly, I focused on kindness, clarity, and my own boundaries, knowing that honoring my feelings didn't mean I was rejecting theirs. This journey taught me that even when words feel heavy, speaking from a place of integrity creates space for genuine understanding and healing, regardless of the outcome. The core of ending a relationship with integrity is about being honest without blame and owning your truth without succumbing to guilt. It's recognizing that sometimes love means letting go in a way that's respectful to both parties, even if it brings pain or discomfort. For many, it involves clear communication, sharing reasons honestly but gently, and giving the other person room to process their feelings without defensiveness. It's about being authentic, not perfect, knowing that showing up with vulnerability allows both people to heal more fully. When we approach endings with compassion and clarity, we set a foundation for healthier future relationships, or at least healthier parts of ourselves moving forward. While every story of ending is unique, the principles of integrity remain constant. Speak your truth, listen to theirs, and honor your feelings. This creates a bridge, however fragile, that allows both people to part ways without unnecessary bitterness or regret. Sometimes, it means having difficult conversations in a quiet, safe space, and sometimes it involves writing a letter where you can select your words carefully. The goal isn't perfection but sincerity. By choosing honesty over comfort or avoidance, you are carving out a space for genuine respect, one that can carry you through the pain toward healing and ultimately peace. Remember, respecting yourself while respecting another in an ending often sets the tone for a new beginning, one rooted in dignity and understanding. Healing doesn't need to be loud or forceful to be effective. Often, it's in the quiet, steady movements where true strength reveals itself. It's possible to feel deeply wounded and still treat yourself with kindness and patience. Healing can be a gentle process because it is about nurturing your own well-being, allowing space for your emotions to surface without judgment. This might mean giving yourself permission to cry, to rest, or to simply sit with your feelings, recognizing that these moments are part of the growth rather than signs of weakness. At the same time, healing can be remarkably strong because it involves making conscious choices to move forward, to set boundaries, and to reclaim your power after vulnerability has been exposed. When healing involves both strength and softness, it becomes an act of courage. For example, you might start by acknowledging pain honestly and allowing yourself to feel it fully. From there, you can take practical steps, like talking to a trusted friend, journaling, or seeking support, that reinforce your resilience. It's helpful to remember that healing isn't a straight line. Some days, you might feel tough and self-assured, while others may remind you of your tenderness. Both are necessary. Embracing this duality lets you navigate difficult emotions with resilience without pushing them away, and it fosters genuine growth. Over time, this gentle strength nurtures inner peace, helping you rebuild trust in yourself and your capacity to heal from even the deepest wounds. Practicing patience becomes key. Healing isn't about rushing to feel better, but allowing your inner process to unfold naturally. Small acts, like taking a walk, practicing mindful breathing, or setting gentle boundaries, can reinforce your capacity to heal delicately without neglecting your needs. Trust that your resilience is rooted in your ability to hold space for your emotions while also caring for your well-being. When you recognize that healing can be both tender and powerful, you deepen your sense of self-trust and compassion. The quiet strength you develop along this journey becomes a foundation for future relationships and personal growth, reinforcing that healing, at its core, is an act of love, both for yourself and others. Chapter 10. Loving Without Losing. What healthy love looks and feels like. Healthy love begins with a foundation built on mutual respect. This means each person values the other's feelings, boundaries, and perspectives without trying to change or diminish them. Respect is expressed through both words and actions. Listening genuinely when the other shares, honoring their boundaries even when it's inconvenient, and trusting their intentions. When love is rooted in respect, it creates a safe space where both individuals feel seen and valued for who they truly are. This kind of love encourages honesty, where both people can speak openly without fear of judgment or dismissal, nurturing trust and emotional safety. Authentic connection goes beyond surface-level interactions. It involves being fully present with each other, sharing genuine thoughts, feelings, and vulnerabilities without fear of rejection. This connection is built over time through honest conversations, shared experiences, and a willingness to understand each other's inner worlds. Rather than seeking a perfect harmony or avoiding disagreements, healthy love embraces imperfections and sees conflicts as opportunities for growth and deeper understanding. It's about feeling safe enough to be oneself and knowing that the partner values your true self, not an idealized version. In the healthiest relationships, both individuals strive for personal growth alongside the growth of the partnership. Love that supports individual development recognizes that each person is a unique, evolving human being. It encourages pursuing passions, setting personal goals, and maintaining independence, even as they share life together. This kind of love allows space for personal identity to flourish, which in turn enriches the relationship. When both people prioritize their growth as individuals, they bring more authenticity, resilience, and joy into their partnership, fostering a deeper sense of connection rooted in mutual development rather than dependence or codependency. Noticing the calm confidence of a love that honors both people's boundaries is like sensing a gentle but unwavering strength. It's the quiet assurance that each person respects the other's limits without making them feel guilty or selfish. Such love does not push or pressure. It's grounded in understanding that everyone needs space, time, and quiet reflection. This confidence creates a relationship free from the need to control or dominate, where both partners feel secure enough to express their true feelings without fear of rejection or retaliation. It's a love marked by patience and acceptance, where boundaries are seen as a healthy safeguard rather than a barrier. When boundaries are honored, conflicts tend to be less frequent and less intense because both people are clear about what is acceptable and what isn't. They communicate their needs calmly and with respect, knowing that their limits are understood, not dismissed. This confidence allows each person to feel safe and valued, fostering a sense of stability and trust. As a result, love becomes easier to sustain because it's built on mutual understanding rather than on the constant struggle to adapt or compromise unfairly. It's a love that recognizes that respecting yourself and respecting your partner are two sides of the same coin, creating a calm, assured rhythm to the relationship. Practically, noticing this calm confidence involves paying attention to how the couple handles disagreements and boundaries. Do they listen without interrupting? Do they comfortably express their needs without fear of retribution? Are discussions about personal space or emotional limits handled with sensitivity? When these signs are present, it indicates a love that is not only healthy but also resilient, capable of withstanding challenges because it's rooted in respect and confidence. Cultivating this kind of love isn't about trying to never face difficulties. It's about creating a safe harbor where both individuals can stand firm in their boundaries while feeling supported and understood. Real interdependence versus codependence. Understanding the line between healthy interdependence and unhealthy dependency can feel tricky because it often depends on subtle signs that aren't immediately obvious. Healthy reliance is rooted in trust and mutual respect. It means feeling comfortable leaning on someone when needed, knowing that support can be given and received without losing your sense of self. In contrast, unhealthy dependency often involves feeling unable to function or make decisions independently, leading to a sense of vulnerability or helplessness if the other person isn't around. It's like leaning so much on someone that your own balance is compromised, making it difficult to stand alone when necessary. To recognize whether your reliance is healthy or unhealthy, you might notice how you feel when you're alone or when the other person isn't around. If you feel confident and capable on your own, but also open to support, that's a sign of healthy mutual trust. However, if you experience anxiety, fear, or an overhanging need for constant reassurance, that could signal dependence spiraling into unhealthy territory. It's also worth watching your behaviors. In healthy relationships, both partners maintain their interests, hobbies, and friendships outside the relationship. But in dependency, one person may sacrifice their needs and interests to cater to the other's constant demands, gradually losing their sense of individual identity. Another key point is the motivation behind your reliance. When you depend on someone because you genuinely need their support during tough times or to share joy in good moments, that's natural. Conversely, relying solely for reassurance, approval, or to avoid uncomfortable feelings can be signs of underlying insecurities or codependency. Recognizing these patterns isn't about self-blame, but about becoming aware of areas where your emotional boundaries might be blurred. The goal is to nurture a sense of confidence in yourself, knowing that support is a gift, not an emotional crutch. The balance lies in feeling safe enough to lean in without feeling like you're losing your way if support isn't immediate or available all the time. Building relationships where both people can stand on their own without feeling threatened by independence requires patience and intentional effort. This kind of connection is about creating space for both individuals to grow, explore their interests, and maintain a sense of identity that isn't solely tied to the relationship. When both partners feel secure enough to pursue their passions and friendships outside the union, it creates a healthier foundation built on mutual respect and trust. It's like two trees growing side by side, each rooted deeply in their own soil, yet leaning into each other for support without crowding or overshadowing. Such a relationship isn't about losing oneself, but about sharing life while retaining personal autonomy. This process begins with honest communication. Partners need to openly discuss boundaries, personal goals, and their individual needs. When both parties express their desire to maintain independence, it reduces the risk of overreach or unspoken expectations that can create strain. Encouraging each other's personal pursuits not only enriches the relationship with fresh energy, but also fosters a sense of confidence in each individual. Creating routines that honor personal time, such as hobbies, social outings, or quiet solitude, helps develop the skill of standing alone comfortably. Trust plays a central role. Knowing your partner respects your autonomy helps both feel secure, even when apart. Over time, these habits cultivate a joint dynamic where reliance is mutual and balanced, and independence isn't seen as counterproductive, but as a vital part of personal well-being and relational health. Fostering this kind of relationship takes ongoing effort. It involves not only respecting each other's space, but also promoting growth individually and as a couple. Small gestures, like celebrating each other's achievements outside the relationship or allowing space for personal reflection, make a difference. Remember, a relationship where both can stand on their own is one filled with trust and a shared understanding that independence won't lead to distance, but rather deepen the connection. Ultimately, it's about letting go of the need for constant closeness or approval and instead cultivating a space where both can thrive separately and together. This balance creates a foundation of resilience that can withstand life's inevitable ups and downs and assures both partners that they are valued as whole, separate beings while sharing a meaningful bond. How to keep your selfhood inside your relationships. Maintaining your sense of self while opening up to another person can feel like walking a tightrope, but it's a vital part of genuine connection. Sharing intimacy doesn't mean dissolving who you are. Rather, it's about finding a balance between closeness and independence. The key is to clearly understand what aspects of yourself are non-negotiable. For example, your values, passions, and boundaries, and communicate these honestly. When you stay rooted in your true self, you foster a relationship where both partners can grow without losing their individual identities. One practical way to protect your selfhood is to practice self-awareness regularly. Check in with yourself about how you're feeling and what you need, even in moments of closeness. This might mean setting aside time for your hobbies or personal reflection, so your life doesn't revolve solely around your partner. It's also important to recognize and resist the temptation to morph your preferences or opinions just to keep the peace. Instead, aim for authentic expression, sharing your true thoughts and feelings, even if they differ from your partner's. Over time, this honesty helps build trust, making both of you feel safe to be yourselves within the relationship. Another strategy involves establishing boundaries and respecting your limits. For example, knowing when to say no or what topics are sensitive allows you to stay aligned with your core values. It's equally important to listen to your partner's boundaries and to encourage a mutual space where both of you feel heard and respected. Think of intimacy as a dance, each person leading and following, but always with awareness of personal space and comfort. Regularly checking in with yourself about what you're okay with and what feels restrictive lets you keep your identity lively and intact, even as you share your world with someone else. Trust is the foundation that allows you to feel safe being yourself in a relationship. It's built gradually through repeated experiences where your needs are acknowledged and your voice is heard. When you open up about what matters to you, it's natural to worry about rejection or minimization, but trust grows when your partner responds with acceptance rather than defensiveness. This means they listen without trying to fix or dismiss you and show genuine understanding, even if your needs challenge their comfort zone at times. Over time, this reciprocal respect nurtures a confidence that your feelings matter and that you do not have to diminish yourself to be loved. Staying connected to your needs involves consistent self-advocacy. For instance, if you feel overlooked or misunderstood, communicate clearly without blame. You might say, "I need to feel heard in this situation," instead of dismissing your feelings or expecting your partner to read your mind. It's also about recognizing that your needs are unique and valid. No one else can define them for you. When your partner responds positively, even if it takes some effort, it reinforces the belief that your voice is worth having and maintaining within the relationship. Building trust also involves patience and vulnerability. Sharing your true feelings, especially those that reveal your fears or insecurities, can feel risky. But revealing these parts of yourself and seeing acceptance in return helps create a secure environment where honesty flourishes. This mutual vulnerability encourages both partners to be their authentic selves, reducing the tendency to hide or suppress parts of who they are. Over time, such openness becomes the terrain where trust deepens, and your needs become a natural part of your shared life. Remember, trust is cultivated by showing up as your real self and trusting that it's enough to be loved for exactly who you are. Practice, the emotional check-in tool, for you plus with others. Staying aware of how you feel emotionally throughout the day can often get lost amidst the busyness of life. Many of us go through routines without stopping to check in with ourselves, which can lead to unnoticed stress, overwhelm, or disconnection. A straightforward way to stay tuned into your emotional state is to create a routine of quick, honest check-ins that become part of your daily rhythm. Think of this as a gentle pause, a moment where you give yourself permission to feel and observe. These check-ins don't need to be lengthy or complicated. They can be as simple as asking, "How am I feeling right now?" and noticing the answer without judgment. This practice encourages you to develop a habit of tuning into your inner experience rather than ignoring or suppressing it. Over time, this awareness fosters a deeper understanding of your emotional patterns, helping you recognize early signs of stress or fatigue before they become overwhelming. It's like giving yourself a regular health scan, not for your body, but for your emotional well-being. By consistently taking these small moments, you can catch rising tension or declining mood early, giving you a chance to respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively. This simple act of pausing cultivates presence, which is often enough to realign your day and regain emotional clarity. The key is consistency. You might set a gentle alarm on your phone or pair the check-in with a daily activity, like brushing your teeth or making coffee, so it becomes a natural part of your routine. Over time, these moments build resilience, making it easier to navigate life's inevitable ups and downs with a calm, grounded perspective. The more you practice, the more attuned you become to subtle shifts within yourself, which is a huge step toward emotional health and overall connection with others. When you develop a habit of checking in with yourself, it becomes easier to approach your relationships with genuine clarity and kindness. Instead of reacting out of habit or old patterns, you start to notice what you truly feel and need when interactions become challenging. For example, if a conversation with a partner or coworker begins to stir frustration or confusion, pausing to identify your feelings helps you respond more thoughtfully rather than impulsively lash out or withdraw. Recognizing your emotional state can act as a buffer, giving you space to consider your words and actions before taking them. This approach fosters more honest and compassionate exchanges, since you're grounded in your own experience rather than reacting from a tangled mix of assumptions and unresolved feelings. Equally important is extending this awareness and kindness outward. When you understand what's happening inside you, it becomes easier to see the humanity in others. If someone says or does something that triggers a strong emotion, taking a moment to identify your feelings allows you to respond with kindness and understanding, rather than blame or defensiveness. For example, instead of reacting with frustration when your child leaves a mess, pausing to acknowledge your own stress can help you approach the situation with patience. This shift from reactive to reflective responses builds trust and emotional safety in relationships, making interactions more meaningful and less fraught with misunderstanding. This tool also serves as a reminder that everyone carries their own emotional baggage, and just as you check in with yourself, giving others the benefit of patience and curiosity creates space for genuine connection. It's about practicing kindness, both inward and outward, recognizing that emotional awareness isn't about perfection but growth. When you consistently check in and share your feelings authentically, you encourage others to do the same, cultivating relationships rooted in trust and mutual understanding. Over time, this fosters a relationship environment where vulnerability feels safe, and both of you can navigate difficult moments with greater empathy and clarity. A simple but powerful tip for using this tool effectively is to approach each check-in with a sense of curiosity rather than judgment. If you notice discomfort or negative feelings, instead of criticizing yourself, gently acknowledge what's there. This compassionate stance makes it easier to process emotional experiences and keeps the process sustainable over the long term. Remember, These moments of self-awareness aren't about fixing things instantly, but about cultivating an ongoing awareness that informs healthier, kinder interactions with yourself and others. Conclusion: you were never too much, you were just misunderstood. You're allowed to love deeply without disappearing. Many times, we get caught up in the idea that setting boundaries or putting ourselves first is selfish, or worse, a sign that we don't love enough. But loving fully means understanding that your emotional health and personal needs are part of the equation. When you prioritize your well-being, it's not a denial of your love, but a validation of its strength. You're saying, "My love is so real that I can love others without losing sight of who I am." It involves a shift in thinking, seeing boundaries not as walls, but as bridges that help you connect in healthier ways. This clarity allows you to give love generously without risking burnout or resentment, because you're respecting your limits just as you respect the needs of others. This perspective often requires gentle self-talk and patience, especially if you're used to putting others first at the expense of yourself. But the truth is, embracing your worthiness to love and be loved fully is what deepens the connections that matter most. It's also helpful to recognize that loving deeply involves risk, and with risk can come fear of losing or being hurt. Yet, this vulnerability is what allows genuine intimacy to grow. Your emotional depth is like a garden. It needs tending and care, but it produces beauty and strength when cultivated well. Remind yourself that you don't have to carry the weight of your love alone. Sharing your feelings, setting boundaries, and asking for support are ways to honor this gift. Loving fully means trusting that your openness, even in the face of potential pain, is ultimately worth it. When you embrace your capacity for love as a gift, you open the door for authentic, transformative connections, ones that enrich your life rather than diminish it. Recognizing the inherent value of your emotional world helps you stay grounded and resilient, no matter what storms may come. You are not selfish for choosing yourself. Many of us grow up with subtle messages that suggest putting ourselves first is selfish or wrong. These beliefs often come from familiar voices, parents, teachers, or society, that emphasize sacrifice, duty, and taking care of others before ourselves. Over time, carrying this internalized guilt can make it feel almost impossible to give ourselves permission to focus on our own needs without feeling undeserving or selfish. But the truth is, prioritizing your well-being is not a sign of selfishness. It's an essential act of self-respect and preservation. When you neglect your own needs, stress accumulates, relationships may suffer, and your mental health can decline, creating a cycle that ultimately hurts those you love as well. Recognizing that for you to be your best, you must fill your own cup first is a powerful step toward reclaiming your right to care for yourself. This shift requires constant vigilance, gentle self-reminders, and the willingness to challenge ingrained beliefs that you're somehow taking away from others by choosing yourself. Being proactive about setting boundaries can feel uncomfortable at first. Many people worry about how others might react or fear being seen as selfish. But think of it this way. Boundaries are not about shutting people out or being selfish. They are about respecting your own limits and creating space for healthy interactions. When you allow guilt to dictate your choices, it can lead to overextending yourself, resentment, and burnout. Instead, start small by recognizing moments when your needs are ignored or dismissed and gently assert what you need, whether it's time alone, support, or space to breathe. Over time, reaffirming your right to prioritize yourself rewires your inner narrative, transforming guilt into self-compassion. Remember, being kind to yourself isn't a privilege. It's a necessity for living authentically and sustainably. When you begin to treat your well-being as non-negotiable, you'll find that others naturally respect your boundaries and guilt naturally diminishes. It's also helpful to remember that caring for yourself sets an example for others. It teaches those around you that healthy relationships are built on mutual respect and honesty. When you model taking care of your needs without apology, you're encouraging others to do the same. You start to see that your worth isn't determined by how much you give or sacrifice, but by how well you honor yourself. Practicing this consistently can lead to a more genuine life, one where your happiness and health are valued just as much as your commitments to others. Over time, you'll see that your compassion extends both inward and outward, enriching your relationships without depleting your own energy. Guilt may whisper that you're being selfish, but every time you choose yourself, you reinforce the idea that your well-being matters just as much as anyone else's, and that is a profound act of self-love. Self-care is often misunderstood as simple pampering or occasional treats, but at its core, it is the foundation of how we give and receive love. When you nurture your body, mind, and soul, you become better equipped to show up fully in your relationships. If you're tired, overwhelmed, or neglecting your needs, it's likely your interactions with others will suffer. Your patience wears thin, your mood can sour, and your ability to listen with genuine empathy diminishes. Self-care reminds us that our emotional health is just as important as our physical health. Taking time for yourself, whether through restful sleep, nourishing food, exercise, meditation, or hobbies, strengthens your capacity for compassion and patience. When your own needs are met, love flows more freely and authentically, unburdened by the noise of depletion or resentment. This isn't about being perfect or doing everything right. It's about making intentional choices to care for yourself so that your relationships are rooted in genuine connection rather than desperation or guilt. Viewing self-care as the foundation changes how we approach relationships. It encourages us to set boundaries that protect our energy and foster mutual respect. For example, saying no to something that drains you isn't about avoidance, but about recognizing your limits and prioritizing what truly matters. When you're emotionally balanced, you can listen more deeply, respond thoughtfully, and offer support without sacrificing your own well-being. It also models healthy self-respect for others, especially children or loved ones who are learning what love and care look like. Remember, you can't pour from an empty cup. When your own needs are consistently unmet, you risk slipping into patterns of resentment, anger, or indifference, which can damage even the most loving relationships. Investing in your self-care isn't selfish. It's a vital act of love that allows you to be more present, more caring, and more genuine in your connections with others. The core message is simple. To truly love others, you first need to love and care for yourself. Making self-care a priority is an act of honesty with yourself about what you need to thrive. This might mean dedicating time each day to pause, breathe, or reflect. It might involve seeking support when things feel overwhelming or recognizing that your feelings are valid. As you deepen your relationship with yourself, you'll find that your capacity to sustain healthy, loving connections grows stronger. Your willingness to put yourself first in small, intentional ways helps build the resilience necessary to navigate life's challenges without losing sight of your worth. When you treat yourself with kindness and respect, love becomes a shared space of mutual care rather than a game of sacrifice or obligation. The goal isn't to need no one, it's to no longer abandon yourself for connection. Understanding genuine connection begins with a clear sense of who you are. When you know yourself, the thoughts, feelings, beliefs, and boundaries that shape you, you start to build relationships on a foundation of authenticity. Self-awareness isn't about perfection. It's about observing yourself honestly and gently, recognizing your needs without judgment. As you become more attuned to your emotions, you can notice what makes you feel safe, valued, and understood. This awareness also offers clues about the types of relationships that truly nourish you, helping you avoid connections that drain or diminish your sense of self. When you honor what you find within, you create a space where others can do the same, laying groundwork for mutual respect. True connection also depends on respecting both yourself and others. It's easy to get caught up in trying to please or adapt to fit someone else's expectations, but that often leads to losing bits of your own identity. Respectful relationships require honest communication, where each person's boundaries and feelings are acknowledged without pressure or guilt. When you approach others with kindness and understanding, and expect the same in return, you cultivate a sense of safety that encourages openness. Recognizing that everyone has their own struggles and truths can help you view relationships not as a pursuit of perfection, but as opportunities for honest growth and shared compassion. This mutual respect creates a space where both people can be themselves without fear of judgment or rejection. Feeling truly empowered in your relationships means recognizing that your authentic self is enough. It's a quiet but powerful acknowledgement that you don't need to change or hide parts of yourself to be accepted. When you approach connection from this place, you begin to trust your instincts, knowing when a relationship supports your well-being or when it chips away at your sense of self. Empowerment involves setting boundaries clearly and compassionately, giving yourself permission to walk away from relationships that don't align with your values or needs. It's about understanding that your truth matters, and that the right people will embrace you for who you are, not who you pretend to be. To foster relationships where you can flourish fully, It's helpful to develop skills like active listening, honest sharing, and patience. These aren't just tools for others, they are signs of your respect for yourself and your growth. When you communicate your feelings openly, even about difficult topics, you create a cycle of trust and authenticity. A key step is to practice saying no without guilt, recognizing that doing so protects your mental and emotional space. As you begin to see yourself as deserving of connections that nourish your spirit, your confidence grows, making it easier to attract or maintain relationships that support your highest good. Remember, true empowerment isn't about control. It's about owning your space and trusting that the right people will value it. Finally, remind yourself that building relationships that allow you to be fully yourself isn't a one-time effort. It's a continuous process of learning and adjusting. Every interaction enriches your understanding of what works and what doesn't. Over time, you'll find that the most meaningful bonds are rooted in shared respect and genuine understanding. Spaces where your true self can thrive without pretenses or sacrifices. Developing this kind of connection starts with kindness towards yourself. When you nurture this inner foundation, you naturally invite others to meet you there, creating a cycle of authentic, supportive relationships that support your journey of being wholly you. You deserve a relationship where you don't have to shrink to fit. It's easy to fall into the trap of believing we need to change ourselves to earn love or feel valued. But deep down, every part of you deserves recognition and kindness, just as it is in this moment. Recognizing your inherent worth isn't about perfection or ticking off a list of qualities. It's about accepting your whole self, your strengths, vulnerabilities, quirks, and everything in between. Sometimes, this means taking a hard look at the stories you've told yourself about not being enough and gently challenging those narratives. Remember, love isn't a prize for those who fit a certain mold. It's a basic human right that belongs to everyone, especially you. When you start affirming your worth regularly, you build a foundation that helps you see yourself through a kinder, more compassionate lens. That perspective becomes a guiding light as you navigate relationships, reminding you that you don't need to shrink or hide parts of yourself to be loved. Practice saying simple affirmations like "I am enough" or "I deserve love just as I am," often enough that they start to feel true. Eventually, you'll notice an internal shift. You begin to believe, truly believe, that your presence alone is deserving of kindness and respect. Beyond saying affirmations, it's helpful to actively challenge the negative messages you carry about yourself. These might come from past experiences, societal expectations, or critical voices you've internalized over time. Writing down your thoughts and questioning their validity can be eye-opening. Ask yourself, would I speak to a friend this way? Or, is this belief rooted in facts or just my fears? Recognizing and confronting these distortions allows you to dismantle the idea that love must be conditional or earned through perfection. It's also crucial to nurture self-compassion. That means talking to yourself as you would to a close friend, offering understanding rather than judgment whenever you feel unworthy or insecure. Remember, your worth isn't diminished by mistakes, flaws, or moments of doubt. The more you practice accepting yourself fully, the easier it becomes to see your own value, regardless of external circumstances. This kind of internal validation creates a resilient sense of worth that no one can take away, and it sets a foundation for healthier, more genuine relationships. Once you have begun to accept and affirm your worth, the way you approach relationships naturally shifts. Instead of settling for partnerships that require you to hold back parts of yourself or diminish your needs, you start to seek connections where you can be fully yourself. Building relationships that honor your fullness means being honest about what matters to you and not bending or shrinking your needs to fit someone else's idea of compatibility. It's about finding people who celebrate your quirks, encourage your growth, and respect your boundaries. Trusting your intuition becomes vital here. Pay attention when something feels right or wrong. When you enter new relationships, remember that healthy partnerships are based on mutual respect and authenticity, not on sacrifice or emotional survival. It's okay to step away from someone who makes you feel like you must hide parts of yourself or who dismisses your feelings. The right connections will feel like a space where you can breathe freely, where your identity is an asset rather than a burden. Over time, cultivating these kinds of relationships will help reinforce your sense of deserving to be loved completely, just as you are, without compromise or shame. You don't need to harden your heart to heal it. You just need to learn how to stop handing it over to people who don't know what to do with it. You are not selfish for choosing yourself. You are not cold for setting a boundary. And you are not too much. You were just loving from a wound, not a place of wholeness. Healing doesn't mean needing no one. It means you stop abandoning yourself to keep others close. So here's to the version of you that's brave enough to stay rooted in your own skin, to love with a full heart and a firm backbone. Thanks for reading. Thanks for reclaiming. Thanks for coming home to yourself. With love, Mindful Literary.